Hello everyone. This is not a story for the faint of heart. Today, we will be stepping into the darkness of the most gruesome cases, where evil not only exists, but also leaves bloody and haunting traces. This is Real Gruesome Murder Cases, a series of true stories about murders that made the whole world shudder. If you are ready to face the cold truth and the gruesome corners of humanity, come with me to delve deeper into each case. Trial by Egotism. The Honorable Judge Harold Brybar strode to the bench bearing a coy smile. The court knew that smile well, as did millions watching on view screens all over Mars, as did tens of millions back on Earth who wouldn't get the feed for another hour or so. They also knew the arch of his thick gray eyebrows, the well-trimmed salt and pepper hair he'd gracefully let recede, the petite spectacles he wore when reading, and the mild way he cleared his throat to bring the whole courtroom to attention. In offense to all known theories of jurisprudence, Judge Harold Brybar was a celebrity judge, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. As Brybar sat down, he produced his legendary gavel from the folds of his cloak. It was the gavel that had sent General Sabrina Gallo to the slammer. It was the gavel that had brought justice to the ungrateful eight. It was the gavel that had, so mournfully, let the Scarlet Assassin walk on a series of technicalities. Years ago, a rookie reporter dubbed it the cinematic hammer of justice, and the moniker stuck, though Brybar only laughed and shook his head ruefully when asked about the moniker. Chekhov would have surely side-eyed this fabled instrument of law and order. "This should be the final day of the trial," Judge Brybar said, after customarily clearing his throat. "If Miss Toddle's statement runs long, we'll cut for lunch at 11. How long do you think you'll go?" He flashed a smile at the defendant. "An hour should do it." Marissa Towdle flashed a smile right back between lips stained dark red. She came to court in a maroon pantsuit with a long matching jacket that almost reached the ground, and dark lipstick and fingernail polish to match. Stylish, but for her, understated. Earlier in the trial, she'd favored brighter colors, including a pastel blue skirt that drew immense attention, much of it mockery, in the press. She'd been on trial for previous burglaries and had proven as much a celebrity as the judge overseeing her case. That she'd taken to defending herself only heightened the circus atmosphere. You couldn't wish for a more theatrical combination of defendant and judge. "Excellent," the judge said. "That would mean the jury can deliberate over lunch. A smooth running ship at last." The assembled audience, standing room only, laughed nervously, revealing how much tension the courtroom held. In theory, Towdle should be guilty as a Labrador by a demolished birthday cake. She'd been caught red-handed in the most elaborate and movie-like theft in the history of the planet after all. But many speculated Towdle had a trick or two up her sleeve. Gambling websites gave her a 15% chance of acquittal, and even a 5% chance of escape. The third prime participant in this drama feels ordinary by comparison. Veronica Brief charted a conventional path as she rose through the prosecutorial ranks. Top grades, hard work, schmoozing, ambition, and a photographic memory. There's little reason to elaborate on her story. Veronica had aimed for calm, efficient, and professional as her persona. She let Marissa and Judge Brybar provide the entertainment. The stately prosecutor drew little mention in the tabloids despite overseeing the case of the millennium. And she'd presented a good case, which was easy in one sense because of how strong the evidence was. Someone had stolen the twin pins of Mars, diamond-encrusted spikes that ceremonially finished the oxygen dome of the first Martian city. Marissa Towdle was a known high-stakes burglar and ex-con, She'd been present at the benefit concert from which the pins were stolen. She'd purchased the chemicals needed for the distracting foam bomb that had gone off at the concert. And most damningly, one of the diamond pins had been found in her very apartment. The list of witnesses and items in evidence is so long that, again, there's little need to go into much detail. The most troubling possibility was that if the jury liked Marissa too much, that they were simply so entertained, they might ignore the evidence and vote for acquittal. Today, the defendant would make her last appeal. Today, Marissa Towdle, who'd fired her lawyers after just 4 days into the proceedings, would make her closing argument. She wasn't a lawyer, had never been to law school, and committed innumerable mistakes of law throughout the trial, but she still possessed the supernatural confidence of a legendary burglar, so she'd plowed ahead, learned from each mistake of process, always found a way to laugh with the audience as she suffered a series of sustained objections against her. The Red Planet stood entranced, listening to how she would make her final plea. Marissa Towdle rose. She was quite short, but cut a dramatic figure nonetheless. She strode to the center of the room to address the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my honored peers, good morning to you. Also, good morning to everyone watching in the live audience in this wonderful city of New Olympus and all across Mars and our sister planet of Earth. Also, a quick shout out to anyone reading the transcript in the future. That's serious dedication." Laughter. The prosecution has done a thorough job presenting the evidence against me, and I would be foolish to claim no fear. They found one of the diamond pins at my apartment. Can you believe my incredulity? Without that one piece of evidence, all they have is hearsay and circumstance. And who hasn't been hurt by hearsay and circumstance? I was sorely mistreated on the day they overturned my home. Veronica had decided early in the trial not to be surprised by anything Marissa said. Here she was, starting her final defense by bringing up the single strongest piece of evidence against her, submerging it in a strange cocktail of jokes and grievances. Still, she was as oddly compelling as she'd been the whole trial. Have I mentioned how good you look, jury? The fall weather has really brought out your fashion sense, such lovely browns and greens. I'm going to miss you all when this trial is finally over. And soon it will be over, won't it? Oh, I don't know if this is legal. Is it legal to compliment and reminisce with the jury? It is if there's no objection from the prosecution. This was the judge, now looking in Veronica's direction with a raised eyebrow. All around the court, Veronica felt all eyes suddenly on her, and it was true. She could object for relevance or ingratiation, which Mars had added to the legal code 50 years ago. No objection, Veronica said after a pause worthy of a sitcom, to titters and laughter from the audience. She hadn't intended to object at all, no matter how wild the defendant got. It's considered poor form to object during closing arguments, unless the faults are egregious. Plus, ordinary folks see through flattery and immaterial wanderings most of the time, and that should be especially so in this case. Marissa wasn't just on trial for grand theft, but also for assault. When she'd set off the foam bomb at the dedication ceremony, 3 people had been injured, and many dozens more might have been. These charges alone could add up to decades behind bars. A jury might excuse burglary if they liked a defendant, but harming innocent spectators? No way, Veronica thought. Marissa had avoided lengthy prison sentences from previous burglaries through clever negotiating, and because she'd always been careful to avoid violence. Now, she might be mere hours from a lifetime in prison. How was she so calm? At this point, Marissa had moved on to a PowerPoint presentation, with a selection of quotes projected onto the large screen across from the jury, with certain words highlighted for effect. The rotten witch made all the plans and said it would be an easy score without any risk of harm to anyone. That's what one of my supposed henchmen said about me, if you'll remember. I don't see why that insult was necessary. Read the next quote, this time from a witness who supposedly saw me outside the concert hall. She was laughing like a hyena, or like some evil witch. With the shouting inside, I could barely hear her, but I was close enough I could just make out the cackle. I could read each and every one of these quotes, each more demeaning than the last, but you can look over the full list if you've got the stomach for it. So many horrible things said about me, which I don't mind. I can accept taunts and jeers. But it is certainly interesting that so many of these witnesses couldn't help but include spiteful, disparaging remarks. And you'll notice how many bring out the W word. It almost feels like they were coordinating their testimony somehow. Veronica caught a glimpse of the jury. She read ambivalence on their faces, scowls, smirks, narrowed, focused eyes, and furrowed brows. They were all paying attention, but none appeared sympathetic, and only a few seemed amused. She found it galling that Marissa would imply misconduct from the prosecution. Early in the legal process, Marissa had tried to trade the location of the second diamond pin for legal protection, which Veronica would never have agreed to, not leastwise because the police were convinced they could lean on her conspirators to produce the second pin, an assumption which, 7 weeks later, had not come true. Those negotiations were inadmissible at trial, but made Marissa's attempts to cast the prosecution as corrupt all the more preposterous. Marissa knew she was guilty, and knew the prosecution knew she was guilty. And then there's the matter of the diamond pin of peace, found in my apartment, right under my very bed. It's the linchpin of the case against me. But do you find that likely? That a supposed master criminal would conceal the single most damning evidence in the most obvious and cliched place to hide something? Ha! And that underscores my next point, that the diamond pin of prosperity is yet to be found. If I had stolen them both, why hide one in an obvious place, then another where the police have yet still to find? I'm not going to accuse anyone else of being the real thief, and therefore the person who planted the evidence while keeping half the spoils for themselves. Not right at this moment anyway. I don't have the resources of the police or prosecutors to chase leads and likely suspects. But how can you not be suspicious of these circumstances? Marissa had raised her voice by this point. Despite her grandiosity, she'd kept her tone civil, even playful. But now she strode about the floor, her jacket swirling in great red arcs. She turned to the prosecution table and approached Veronica, though even with her heels, she stood barely a few inches taller than her adversary sitting up straight. Marissa leaned over the table between them. Veronica held her gaze in as steely a manner as she could muster. She wasn't intimidated, but feared smiling at this bit of theatrics, which might send the wrong message to the jury. They've stacked things so thoroughly against me. A huge team of cops and prosecutors all working to dig up evidence. 3 of my friends called to testify against me. Hundreds of hours of security video. Reams of texts stolen from my phone. All this effort searching for any slip-up, inconsistency, or wrong place, wrong time circumstance. And in the end, their whole case rests on a single, dubious discovery. Marissa whirled on Veronica, her jacket cape swirling like a tornado. She approached the judge, held his eye contact for many moments. Veronica couldn't read her face with her back turned, but Judge Brybar's eyes narrowed, turning from amused to suspicious to worried. Only then did worry enter Veronica's own mind. Could Marissa really have a grand plan to turn the trial on its head, or even to escape? Everyone in this courtroom stands against me. I've been fighting every official and advocate aligned for a single purpose. These whole 7 weeks I've fought. She stood right before the judge now, a dark red fingernail pointed but a meter from his face. "Control yourself," the judge warned, his voice steady. Marissa slowly retreated her hand to her chest, but kept the finger out. Then she approached still further and placed her hands on the edge of the bench. Judge Brybar screwed his face up in an apoplectic grimace. "I kindly ask you to back away," the judge said with barely concealed rage. And Marissa did so. She turned slowly, her jacket an eddy rather than a hurricane. The whole audience appeared to exhale at this drawdown in tension. The calm wouldn't last. The true thief, the true mastermind, is in this courtroom right now. Marissa raised her hand, extending that damning index finger clad in crimson, thrusting it high in the air like the barrel of a smoking gun. The courtroom turned deathly quiet. Marissa twirled her finger in the air, once, twice. A woman screamed in the audience. Several people stood. Veronica noticed the judge fumbling for his gavel. Why was his gavel not to hand? Veronica's photographic memory went to work, rewinding to a minute prior. The gavel had disappeared from the moment Marissa had placed her hands on the bench. When she'd made that dramatic turn, she must have. "Approach, Your Honor," Veronica called out, but was drowned out by the growing tumult of the audience. She stood and shouted, "Approach, Your Honor! Your gavel! She has your gavel in her sleeve!" The chaos intensified, cries and laughter mixing together. Judge Brybar's eyes were wide as Phobos and Deimos in the Martian night sky. The bailiffs stood frozen for a moment, but one caught Veronica's eye. They nodded at each other and sprung into motion. Veronica charged. She couldn't say why, necessarily, but the thought entered her mind that perhaps this was a grand distraction to allow Marissa some clever escape, and that was just too much of an affront to the seasoned prosecutor. It was a breach of decorum to get involved in bailiff duties, but Veronica had been a track athlete in college and had taken basic police training. And there was so much energy in the courtroom. The bailiff, a stocky woman with a tight ponytail, whose expression almost never changed. Her name was Lawrence, Veronica wanted to say, got there first and held Marissa under the arms. Marissa was making a show of struggling without really struggling, calling her capture a brute. Veronica held Marissa's eye contact while she riffled in her sleeves, producing the lost gavel within seconds. "I believe this belongs to you," she said with what she hoped was cinematic showmanship as she cast the gavel onto the bench. Adjourned. Adjourned. Take the defendant into custody. The judge had retrieved the cinematic hammer of justice and was banging it on the bench like a woodpecker. Slowly, the veins in his forehead receded as the bailiffs took Marissa away. Next, the judge leaned down to whisper to Veronica, "Meet me in chambers. I fear we're looking at a mistrial." Of course, a mistrial. Was that Marissa's plan? But how would this help her? More chances to escape, maybe, but then she'd surely earned tighter security from this fiasco. She'd wait in prison for the next trial, and the evidence against her would be as strong as ever. Why had she done this? Why had she made such a scene? But then, she'd so loved playing the lawyer, stirring up drama and having all eyes on her. These last 7 weeks may have been the most exciting of an already legendary life. With this performance, Marissa Towdle hadn't earned her freedom, but she'd earned another shot at being the center of the known universe. My friend Matilda. She did it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This all started when Sadie moved into a new home. 25 years old, a nice car, a new house, and a cat. She liked cats. They are self-sufficient, but at the same time, loving balls of fluff and affection. Her cat was always with her and followed her from room to room. Her cat, Matilda, was also her best friend. Not just words, they really were friends. They talked to each other and slept together. Moving into the house and setting it up was seriously the first adult thing she ever did. She got the house for a great price, and the previous owners told her they needed to sell fast because they took a job in California and needed to be there by the first of the month. She remembered this house when she was little. Her aunt lived here, and her mom and her would visit a few times a month. Her aunt had a little girl she played with when she was there. Maddie was her name. They loved playing dress-up and could play forever. She had a favorite doll she carried with her everywhere. It was an off-brand Barbie-type doll, but it was dressed like a hippie and had blue hair. Sadie thought that was the coolest doll in the world, and when they played, the doll went on adventures, traveled all over the world, and always came home from her trip and took a nap. Sadie and her mom went to the house one day, but Maddie wasn't there. Her mom told her she was gone. Sadie figured she had moved and went in to play with the toys again. But Sadie felt like Maddie was there, playing with her. Maddie told her she would be with her forever, and she was. Sadie and her mom would come over, and Sadie would go to Maddie's room and play. She knew Maddie was there, in the room. Maddie told her where she was, but it did not make sense. Sadie never told an adult what Maddie told her. They stopped going over to the house after a few months. She thinks they moved out and went to another town. She heard her mom telling someone that they went upstate. They never talked about where, nor did they mention a place, just upstate. Sadie grew up and did well in school. She knew things thanks to Maddie, and because of that, she got away with a lot that she shouldn't have. But once she started college, that feeling and precog inkling disappeared. These days, she never thinks about it. Lately, though, she's getting that little tickle again. She knows things and has a familiar feeling that she can't shake. At night, she dreams amazing dreams. During the day, she sees things around her, people, events, and places she dreamed about the night before. Maddie was back. The little girl, Maddie, not someone her age. She thought about that, and it made sense to her. She knew her at the age of 6 and 7, and to Sadie, Maddie would always be 7 years old and carry the hippie doll with blue hair. A few weeks after they moved into the house, Matilda started a strange ritual. When Sadie came home from work, Matilda would be in the corner of the living room, relaxed but seeming to be scared or nervous. She would walk over and pick her up, but this time, she realized the floor was a little soft. It felt spongy. She called a contractor, Robin and Wilhelmina Ruck, and on Saturday, he and his wife stopped by to evaluate the work. He measured, tested, and told her $600 to make it solid again. She agreed, and they would start on it Monday morning. The contractors lived a few doors away, and she had no issue telling them she would leave the key on a magnet in the mailbox next to the front door. At 8 o'clock, she left for work, leaving the key where she had said. And at 10:30 on the dot, Wilhelmina called and told her she needed to get home now. It took her half an hour to get home, and when she did, there were police cars, a coroner, and more people in front of and inside her home than she thought possible. As she parked at the end of her driveway, she was approached by a pair of plain-clothed detectives, a man and a woman. "Are you Miss Roberts?" the man asked. "I am." "What's going on?" Sadie asked. "I am Detective Marlowe, and this is Detective Finley. We are here investigating the incident in your living room." "Okay, She was confused, and looking at her face, you could see the disconnect between what she knew and what they just said to her. Sadie said, "What incident?" Detective Finley asked, "You have no idea?" Sadie shook her head, hoping someone would fill her in. Detective Marlowe said, "It appears that your contractor opened a section of your floor this morning to do the repair you asked him to do and found something rather disturbing." She stared at him like he was about to grow a third eye. He looked at her, she knew, waiting for her to say something, but she didn't. He continued, "They found the remains of a child, wrapped in plastic, airtight. Her neck was broken. Can you shed some light on any of this?" "Number, I can't. I bought this house a month or so ago and moved in. I always liked this house and was happy it went on the market." Detective Finley said, "You are familiar with this house?" "In a way. When I was little, maybe 6 or 7 years old, my mom and I used to visit here. I called the lady Aunt Roberta. I think their last name was Powell. Now I realize she was not any relation, just a friend of my mother. She had a daughter, Maddie, that I played with when I was here." The detective added, "What happened to them?" "All I remember is that they moved upstate." "Where upstate?" Marlowe asked. "No idea. All they ever said was upstate, never a city name." "Can we speak to your mother?" "How can we get in contact with her?" Finley asked. Sadie smiled ever so slightly. Before she could speak, Finley asked, "Why the grin?" "I have a rather interesting sense of humor, always have. I almost told you to contact my mom by seance, which made me smile. My mother died a couple of years ago from cancer." "Sorry to hear that." Both detectives narrowed their eyes at the comment, but they let it pass. "Is there anyone you know who can tell us about Roberta and Maddie?" "I have no clue. Until last night, I forgot all about this." Both detectives showed a curiosity in their eyes, speaking together. "Last night?" "It's kinda silly, but I dreamt about Maddie and I last night. We played in her room as our parents had coffee and sat at the kitchen table. Probably because yesterday I went up to the attic and it looked like no one had been there in a long time. It was covered in dust. But I found a box marked Maddie's things. I opened it and found a hairbrush, her favorite one. We used to brush each other's hair back then." "Can we get that brush?" Marlowe asked. "Of course. It is still in the attic. Pull the cord in the hall and climb up. There is no light up there, so you'll need a flashlight." "You said it was covered in dust. Was there any disturbance in that dust?" Marlowe asked. "Well, other than my footprints, my shoe prints actually, there were children's prints in the dust. Bare feet. They looked fresh, so I thought the previous owners had a kid who went to the attic once before moving. We need to check out that attic." Marlowe looked at Finley, who nodded. He donned gloves and booties and headed into the house. "Can we go inside? I would like to see how much of my home is disassembled." Finley gestured, and they went into the house. The contractors sat at the breakfast bar, and Sadie walked over to them. Finley followed. Mr. Ruck said, "It appears your floor was so bad because someone removed and did not properly replace it after they buried the body. At that moment, the clear plastic containing the bones of a child was extracted from the floor." Sadie looked at it and was shocked. "That's Maddie," she exclaimed. "How do you know?" "That doll, it's unmistakable. She took it everywhere with her. Maddie and I used to play with it all the time." Finley walked over and looked at the digital images they had taken before they moved the bones. She looked and found the doll. In the image, the skeleton was lying on its back, the doll on its chest, and the hands of the victim holding the doll. Whoever did this knew the relationship between the girl and the doll. Finley returned to the three onlookers as Marlowe returned with the box of Maddie's possessions. "I found the brush. Maybe we can make a positive ID of the little girl," he said. Finley replied, "No need." Sadie made a positive ID. He looked at the skeleton. "How?" "That doll. They played with it when they played together." "Are you certain, Miss Roberts?" "I am. I know it. I feel it. Look at the doll. On its left hand, you'll see a couple of fingers missing. Her cat chewed them off." She grabbed the tablet and found the picture of the left hand. Fingers were missing. "Okay then. Maddie has been found and will be properly laid to rest. First, our ME needs to examine her. She was my friend when I was little. Let me know when I can properly bury her. We'll keep you informed." They left the house, and in a few minutes, the other cops and everyone else left. Mr. and Mrs. Ruck and Sadie were left alone. Matilda came from the back of the house and hopped onto the counter. She snuggled to her owner. "I think I will call it a night. I can take care of it in a few hours tomorrow. I have all the measurements, and the detectives said they would not need to return to the hole. So, tomorrow, it will look like it was never an issue." "Thank you." He walked over and covered the hole with a tarp, stapling it to the plywood around the hole. Sadie knew it was a critter barrier and to stop the weather from getting into the house. Once they left, Sadie sat on the couch facing the hole. Matilda sat on her lap but had not moved for over an hour. Maybe 15 minutes passed, and the hair on Matilda's back started to rise. Sadie felt it too. The room got cold, and the hairs on Sadie's neck began to rise. Matilda's back was hunched, and she was staring at the tarp. Her eyes focused on the tarp, and her pupils were their maximum size. She was looking for something, or she saw something. The tarp pushed up slightly, and Matilda hissed. Sadie calmed her. As she did, she saw her friend rising through the tarp, and she was holding the doll. More precisely, she could see through her friend. "Thank you." Her words sounded distant, echoed like they were in a great cavern. A moment later, Maddie began to fade until she was gone. Matilda settled back onto Sadie's lap. "Well, Matilda, I know now why I had to buy this house. Maddie needed to rest, and we needed to help her." Matilda gave the strangest meow Sadie had ever heard, and then started purring. Sadie sat on the couch a bit longer, thinking of playing with Maddie. It was a good memory. She did it. Now, her friend can rest, petrified. You would never have noticed it if you weren't looking for it. That was precisely the point. The instructions given in my embroidery group had been clear enough. After nightfall, take a stroll on the second lane past the bakery, look for the unlit lamppost, and turn down that dark alley, they said in hushed voices as the pianist began playing in sudden loud fervor. By coincidence. Then you will see a mossy stone staircase, which you will descend, and at the end of it, there is a dim hallway. She lives through the set of green doors on the left. The doors are tall and French like my husband's mistress, but peeling and weathered. I can tell they were once painted a lovely shade of emerald green. Half of that green paint lies in small piles of flakes on the cobblestone. I debate knocking and decide instead to reach with false confidence for the rusted copper handle. It turns downward easily. A small bell rings and echoes. Welcome. On the posters she is grotesque, an example of how time and sin turn a person sour. but in person she has the kind of enduring beauty you can't tear your eyes away from. Do come in, darling. Don't be shy. Contrary to popular belief, I don't bite, although I can't say nothing here does. Her voice is like a wind chime, melodic and resonating, barely brushing over the crashing waves of her words. I wonder if I'm here too long, if that voice will drag me out to deep sea. Or did that only work on men in the myths? Take a seat, love. Yes, there is perfect. Would you like a cup of tea? Well, it's never too late for tea, is it now? I enjoy it late into the night myself, but maybe you've been raised more proper than that. Here, the cup is warm, not hot. If she noticed my shaking hands when reaching for it, she didn't say a word. It takes more than a few seconds for my eyes to adjust to the warmly lit room after a dark and shadowy street. Among her many talents, it cannot be said that she was a good decorator. The shabby boards of the walls are empty, but for an assortment of faded newspaper clippings from the highlights of her anonymous career. Obituaries, mostly. A tattered blue curtain with tassels hangs behind the armchair she's perched in, dividing off part of the room. Eccentrically painted shelves house arrays of books and bottles of objects my gaze prefers not to settle on. She would have been called a witch for her collections had she not already acquired numerous more colorful nicknames by the public. The only item of some value is worn loosely around her slender wrist, a heavy and ornate gold watch. The kind of thing that would make a petty thief's day to see glinting underneath a man's sleeve in the street. She catches me admiring it and smiles thinly, holding up her arm up to eye level. Isn't it a beauty? It was my first husband's, this watch. On the 10th anniversary of his death, I'm going to smash it to bits and melt the gold into a necklace for myself. I deserve a little gift from him, I think. Her laugh unnerves me, but I find myself too curious to be afraid. I politely say my condolences for her husband's death. Oh, darling, don't be sorry that that man is dead. The one good thing he did was to be the inspiration for the charity work I do. I haven't always done this. I used to be an actress, you know, a leading lady of the stage. Men would come from all over the city to see my shows, for I was beautiful then. Sometimes after the shows, they would approach me, usually blind drunk, complimenting my dress or what was underneath it, asking for a kiss or a drink or a night. And sometimes they didn't ask. My husband became my husband not because he asked, but because he damaged me. And he was rich enough to get away with it, and clever enough to know that marriage was my only option. She smooths down the skirt of her maroon dress, then looks up at me with a solemn expression I can't fully read. It isn't hard to believe she was once a sought-after woman. Though sunken in age, her cheeks are smooth, and her face looks as though it was hand-carved out of porcelain by God. Her hair is twisted into a dark crown atop her head, secured with metallic pins. Her eyes are like a cat's, but not a house cat. No, definitely not. Like those of a tiger that has been left to go hungry for far too long. I will her to continue talking and not look at me with those eyes again. We sip our tea in unison, upholding our masquerade as ladies. She takes in a breath. He said he loved me, and at the beginning, I believed it. He may have loved me. He certainly desired me. I think mostly he loved seeing the desire and jealousy of other men when he told them I was his wife. But that got old fast. So did I, in his eyes. When it had been a year, and I still had not given him a child, I turned ugly to him, and he acted ugly accordingly. One night, he came home from the pub talking about how the other men's wives had filled their houses with children by now. He spoke of babies like cattle. Then he threatened that he ought to tell the whole town that I was secretly a whore and leave me. I should have kept quiet and obeyed and smothered him in his sleep, like a good wife. Instead, I promised him that as long as I was alive, I would never let a child be born cursed enough to have him as a father. I'm sure you know what happens next, or otherwise you wouldn't be here, my darling. She traces a scar on her chin that I hadn't noticed before, extending along her jaw to the start of the delicate bones of her neck. I imagine it snaking around the rest of her throat in a ring, strangling her pale skin, and my breath catches. It looks as if lightning struck her. She was struck, though not by something as rare as lightning. I instinctively touch my collarbone, where I know without looking there is a ghastly bruise. My modest neckline covers it, but somehow it feels like she knows it's there. My mark of pain. I hope it goes away quickly, so my husband does not think me unsightly. But then again, perhaps that will not be necessary. I nod at her meekly to show that I do know what happens next. I can't say whether he truly meant to kill me, but to hurt me, to wound me, to make my thoughts and words disappear in flames. He meant that with all his heart. The funny thing is, it was him who made my words true. Of course, he couldn't have known that I was with child. Even I did not know then. After, no one would ever get to know. I made a gravestone, although there was nothing to bury. And then, a month later, I buried my poor, sick husband next to it, marked only with a slab that did not bear his name. Wealthy and beloved as his gold in his life, in death, he became only stone. The disease had taken him so quickly that there was no time for anyone to save him. Shame on chance to take him from this world so young. Got him like poison, essentially. The porcelain around her eyes cracks faintly in amusement. I have nothing to say in response. My mind stuck on the picture of a crude gravestone smaller than it should be. Now, love, how would you like your tragedy to occur? The widows in my town all chose differently. Most agree that the worst methods are only to be used for the worse husbands, but sometimes there is no rhyme or reason to it. After all, all's fair in love and war. Millions of second and third and fourth thoughts crossed my mind on the way here. But now those voices are silent, and there is only mine. Mine and hers, and the input of the hissing wind outside. Well, what will it be? In 2 weeks, it will happen. On the way home after a day of work, my husband will feel a bout of hopelessness that gives him a nudge to hurl himself off of the local bridge. The river below is not a kind one, especially to those who never learned to swim. He will have been drunk, since he often is, and everyone knows how he gets when he's drunk. No one will discuss a death as taboo as taking your own life. My children and I will cry and wear black for weeks, though no longer than what is expected. At the same time, the black of our bruises will fade. He won't be missed very much, really. Perhaps that French woman will miss him, but she would have met the man that I knew soon enough. I will decide to raise my children in the countryside alone, and we will be happy. I cannot say yet whether I will regret it. The final time I will see the woman's wild tiger's eyes, she will tell me that not once has she regretted anything in her life. She will say that it was a pleasure to do it, and fearfully I will believe her. Oh, it really is getting late, love. Your family must be at home expecting you. I reply that they are, and I thank her for her kindness, nervously reaching to shake her hand. How much blood has coated it? On the posters, they say she has killed 3 men, but I know these were simply the times she wanted it enough to make it gruesome. The posters also envision her as grotesque, which means that they have not ever seen her, or the mark on her jaw from her fall after being struck by lightning. The posters know nothing. The men know nothing. We women must stick together, yes? The image of my young daughter appears and consumes my mind. I would do everything in my power to ensure she never has to know the instructions to get here. There will be no scars for my girl to trace. I will make sure of that. I nod and drop the woman's unassuming porcelain hand. Beneath the sound of her wind chime voice is a softer noise I hadn't paid attention to before, almost like a breeze rustling through dying trees, overlaid with the humming of the earth. It is separate from the wind and the rushing of my blood. She notices my piqued interest, and rather than say anything, stands, chuckles, and regally draws back the tattered blue curtain behind her. In view now is a cage filled with twisting and writhing scaled bodies, hissing and competing with each other for air. They move as one, a trembling monster of green. I step back in sudden horror. She isn't looking at me, but I see her eyes flash ravenously. You don't have to worry about them, darling. Their venom is reserved for the venomous hamster owl. Trigger warning: crime scene, murder, suggestion of sexual violence. Douglas hadn't felt his stomach stir on the job for years, not since he was green out of the academy. Something about the blood spatter against the kids' toys, though. It had sent his head spinning, dizziness threatening to undermine his hard-won reputation. The bright, dancing geometric shapes that adorned the red-stained sheets and curtains were not helping matters. Thankfully, the girl's body had already been removed. He averted his gaze to the ceiling and traced the lines of the Artex pattern, while taking deep breaths and composing himself. Putting his heavy case down in the doorway, he steeled his will and finally stepped inside. Douglas methodically placed his feet on the clean areas of carpet, stepping over the red smears that had been spread all over the room. Slowly, he made his way over to the grim-faced detective, who was already surveying the scene. "If you're gonna lose your lunch, Doug, please do it outside," Bishop remarked, not looking up from where he crouched, picking through the youngster's possessions with the blunt end of a pen. "I'm okay. It just got me for a second. Not seen one this bad since '87 and the Dilby murders down in Reading. I'll be all right." It's a damn shame, that's for sure. Sweet girl, going by all the stuffed animals and posters. My kids got a thing for boy bands too, he said, gesturing around at the walls that looked like they'd been at the business end of a meat grinder. "You've certainly got your work cut out for you, ready for a long night." "Absolutely, sir. It'll be worth every coffee to nail whatever sick son of a bitch could do something like this," Douglas said, his muscles turning from jelly to iron at the resolve his own words invoked. "Good. Well, I'm done here for now. Do your thing and get me the results as fast as you can. The father is in the back of a car already, but he's denying it all, doing a grand job of playing the distraught, loving parent. So, I'll need whatever you can get me to pin him," Bishop said as he pulled off a pair of sweaty latex gloves and threw them into a hazmat bag in the hallway. "Ever consider it might not have been him and you're torturing a grieving parent?" Douglas asked to his retreating back. "Come on, Doug. How long you been doing this? It's always the dad," the detective said, turning when he reached the top of the stairs. "I'd start with the machete stuck in the bed head if I were you. But hey, I'm not the scientist." Douglas took up his large case, unclasped it, and opened it wide on the floor of the hallway outside the girl's bedroom door. He pressed his shoulders against one wall to let a beat officer past and swore under his breath at the close confines. It was almost easier in the woods, although the results were undoubtedly better from inside a sealed home. He snapped on his own gloves, grabbed a Sharpie and a handful of plastic bags, and went to work. With a roll of his eyes, he grabbed the machete first. Of course, that was marked vital. Then he gathered all the jewelry she'd been wearing and had been left behind by the morticians. Most of it was plastic, brightly colored and in the shape of butterflies or flowers. He pulled hairs and fibers from the bed and carpet, then combed the room from top to bottom for any dropped items. Nothing turned up. Sheets, clothes, carpet, and curtain swatches all went into larger bags. Even those fundamentals took hours, mostly because he was more fastidious than most. He had lost count of the cases that had been won thanks to his diligence. Having worked with Bishop for almost a decade, he knew all too well that whichever way it went, a grieving father's future rested on his work alone. The detective had already found his man. Sipping a hot coffee from a cardboard cup, he scanned the room from its center. Taking a break had the tendency to reveal more than the close-up work. Sometimes you had to take a step back and think. He marked a Blockbuster video on the desk. He would fill out the forms to get it returned, but he doubted the shop would ever see it again. Once they saw the news, they would probably refuse it anyway. What looked like her diary was tucked under the edge of the mattress. He made a mental note to grab that, and in the same vein, thought to check for any hidey holes in vents or behind furniture. Girls of an age stashed plenty of secrets. His eyes fell on the mountain of stuffed toys, wedged against the dresser and covered in a mist of dried blood droplets. He had avoided it until then, worried it might set off his queasy reaction a second time. While forcing his gaze to wander across it, two beady yellow eyes caught his attention. With a smirk, he put down his coffee, quickly reapplied the gloves, and strode over to greet them. "Well, look at you," he said, pulling out what could only be described as a hamster owl. The freakish chimera stared back at him, almost with its own intent. "Furby, right?" "Oh, woo-woo, whoa!" The demented toy yelled as it came to life in his hands, batting its eyelids and twitching its ears. He almost threw it across the room in surprise, but managed to control the impulse and, holding it at a full arm's length, set it down on the girl's desk. "Damn thing!" he yelled to a series of chuckles from the officers stationed outside. He went back to the list of tasks he had assigned himself, but throughout his bagging and tagging, he was constantly assaulted by an unintelligible babbling. The cursed doll would go quiet, and then out of nowhere, at high volume, holler at Douglas. After the third time of jumping out of his skin, he stalked back to the desk in a fury. "I remember the ads for you," he said through gritted teeth, fully aware he was now talking to it. "Remember," it interrupted. "Yes, remember. Very clever. I remember that you are supposed to be smart. Hell, I'm pretty sure there was a ban on you being brought into the station, in case you could listen in on things you shouldn't. Something about spy software or AI even." "Remember!" the Furby squawked again. You don't seem so smart to me. Just a damn novelty. Do me a favor and shut up!" Douglas roared. He turned his back on it, not wanting to waste any more time trying to figure out how to turn it off. He was almost done and was feeling the impatience of the late hour and the clouded thinking it brought. Yet, before he could take a second step, he spun around at the words the toy belted at his back. "You're mine. Bitch." He stood frozen, head cocked to one side and looking into its demon-like eyes. Surely not. "What did you say? Did you remember?" He ventured, not sure if he was pushing the limits of what was reasonable. "Remember, you're mine." bitch. You can't prance around naked in your window like that and expect me not to want you. I might be your neighbor, but I'm still a man." Douglas shook his head with raised eyebrows, let out a sigh of disbelief, and bagged the toy. He marked it as vital. Hopefully it would be enough obscure recollection. "Dad, where are the yams at?" Frankie yelled up the basement stairs. "Behind the peas, son," Dad yelled back. As Frankie walked to turn the light switch off, he looked over at his father's terrible masonry job that he did right after Frankie's 12th birthday. Until recently, the basement had always been a place Frankie's mother and father never allowed them in. The only things down there were various odds and ends. His father's tools and the freezer next to the pantry. Frankie flipped the switch, putting the basement back into darkness again. "Jenny, did Robert tell you what happened at school other day?" asked Frankie. "No, he never calls me anymore," said Jenny. As Mom was mashing the potatoes Dad had cleaned and prepped for her, Frankie handed Dad the yams he requested. "Well, I met Susie. She's in my biology class. She also wants to be an X-ray tech. She is so cool," said Frankie. "Oh, Frankie, another one? What happened to, what's her name?" asked Jenny. "Rebecca," Frankie said somberly. "Yay, what happened to her?" asked Jenny. "I have no idea. She just disappeared. Everything seemed to be going great. Then she just ghosted me," said Frankie. "She probably ran off with someone else. I never liked that girl," said Mom. "Frankie," yelled Robert from the living room. "Come here. I think this is the Lions' year." "Okay, hang on," Frankie yelled back. "Better go and watch the game, son," Dad said. "Yay, okay," replied Frankie. It was Thanksgiving for the Goldsmiths, a real family affair. All the kids were out back with their father, Jenny's husband, playing in the snow. Mom was trying to finish the pies, and Jenny was doing the usual Wordle on her phone. Robert was in the living room watching the game. The usual Thanksgiving chaos. As Frankie went to sit with Robert, there was an abundance of chips, dips, and cakes on the coffee table. "They are killing the Bears," said Robert happily. "What's the score?" asked Frankie. 38-10. It's going to be their year, I swear," said Robert. As Frankie kicked back watching the game with his brother, the kids were on the back deck taking off their snow gear, and Robert started complaining. He was not a kid person. The three siblings were all completely different due to being adopted. However, they were still solid in their bonds with each other, and Robert always kept his opinions to himself. "My name is Frankie Goldsmith. I am here on Thanksgiving telling a story so screwed up, it's hard to tell it without it sounding like a Criminal Minds episode. No, seriously. If I was outside my head, I wouldn't believe it myself. Let's get back to it." Frankie was in college chasing a degree as an X-ray technician. His sister Jenny was the oldest, being in her mid-30s with 3 children. Her husband, James, was a salesman with a local company. He was a good guy who went to work, came home, and enjoyed his simple and organic life. "Everyone to the table! It's time to eat!" yelled Dad. Everyone rushed to the table. Mom's cooking was impeccable. This was one of 3 major meals cooked at the Goldsmiths that was off-the-chain delicious. The other 2 are Easter and Christmas New Year's. All the food was great and unique to its holiday. As they gathered around and sat, Jenny's twins, Lenny and Lucy, started arguing. "I want to sit next to him," shouted Lucy. "No, I am," argued Lenny. "Stop it, you two." "Olivia, you sit next to Paw Paw," James said to his oldest daughter. Lenny and Lucy seemed to argue about everything. We all settled into our seats and grabbed our neighbor's hand so Dad can say grace, which was one of our family traditions. As Dad began, That's when this story goes from 0 to 100 real quick. Father, as we gather here today, we give thanks to you. Crack. Boom. The front door exploded open, and in rushed at least 30 police officers, fully armed and yelling for everyone to get on the ground. 2 of the officers grabbed the children and rushed them out the hole where our parents' front door used to be. Now, let's pause. You gotta be wondering, what in the hell is going on? Let's back it up just a little bit, like 6 months. We will get back to it, I promise. First, I gotta catch you up some so you understand what the hell is happening. Jenny showed up around 10:30 a.m. to talk to Mom about the new outfits she purchased for Olivia. I was at the table studying for an exam I had later that week. Jenny chatted to Mom about the clothes. Then she started to explain that she saw a TikTok about a cold case that reminded her of a reoccurring dream she had. Mom's face went blank and she asked, "What did you do, Jenny?" "Nothing. What do you mean?" Jenny replied. The room lost all its happy energy as I picked up Mom's vibes. Oblivious, Jenny continued to talk about this TikTok and how she thought it was about her birth parents. "Mom, you said the orphanage told you that my parents were very young and just left me there?" Jenny asked. "Yes, dear. Now enough of this talk. I need to go to the grocery store." "You two lock up if you leave," Mom said. Something was definitely up to something. Mom appeared so rattled as she was fumbling about. She left in such a hurry she forgot to grab her phone. Jenny came over and sat at the table with me. "Frankie, I have to tell you something, but you can't tell Mom and Dad," Jenny said with a serious expression. I nodded and she asked, "Have you ever heard of 23andMe?" "No, what's that?" Frankie asked. "They use DNA to find out your ancestral family tree. I sent off my DNA and discovered that I am from Northern Africa," Jenny said. "Okay, why the sudden interest?" Frankie asked. "That is not important. What is important is that I found out who my birth parents were," Jenny said. "Were?" Frankie asked, puzzled. "Jenny, what is going on?" "Hang on." Jenny got up and walked over to the counter where Mom's phone was and picked it up. She tried to unsuccessfully unlock the phone twice. "What are you doing?" Frankie yelled. "That's Mom's phone." "You are acting crazy." "I got to know for sure, Frankie," Jenny said. Frankie paused a minute, sighed heavily and said, "Try our birth years." The phone unlocked and Jenny started to go through it, and it was all normal stuff. "It doesn't make sense," Jenny said quietly. "Will you tell me what is going on?" "What did you think was going to be on it?" Frankie asked. "Frankie, Mom and Dad kidnapped us," Jenny blurted out. "There is no orphanage. My name is not Jennifer Goldsmith, it's Ada Abimbola. My parents and I went missing 31 years ago." "What? This can't be true. Mom and Dad would not do this," Frankie yelled. "Frankie, I researched it. It's true. I talked to a detective, and we cannot tell them we know. We must act normally. The detective believes there are more children they kidnapped besides me, you and Robert. The police know and discovered who you are too," Jenny said. Frankie knew it was true. As hard as it was to believe, he could feel it. What now? This was all he could think. He walked over and sat on the couch, and Jenny came over and sat next to him, knowing exactly what he was feeling. Betrayal, hurt, and curiosity. Who were these people? "Frankie, we must work with the police. James knows all about it, but we cannot tell Robert," Jenny said seriously. "The police are watching Mom and Dad. They think they are holding another family now. Can you meet with Detective Hunt?" He will explain everything to you." Jenny continued. "Okay, now that you are all caught up, what now? Should I leave it alone and just walk away? No, you say? All right, I will finish the story the best way I can, but it doesn't get better. If you're sure? Okay, let's get to it." Just as the two officers brought the children outside, Dad jumped up and ran towards a cabinet. Pop, pop. The police shot him just as he was reaching into the cabinet. Robert kept yelling, "Can someone please tell me what is going on?" I yelled over at him to just do as they say. Mom got onto the floor, and it was obvious by her face that she knew exactly what was going on. The gig was up. As I was lying on the floor, I looked over at Dad, and he was not moving, just bleeding out. I did not feel any remorse. The officers handcuffed Mother and led her out the door. They let the rest of us get up. Jenny, James, and I took Robert over to the couch and told him what was going on. He just sat staring blankly, not saying anything. Life seemed to come to a halt after that. Everything played out exactly like Detective Hunt said, except one detail. They never expected that one, overlooked detail. The police took Dad, or Thomas Dunning's phone, and found evidence of everything. Information and photos of all the children they abducted, the ones they sold, the parents they killed. In the basement, they found the remains of over 40 bodies behind the block wall, as well as a torture chamber. They also discovered multiple storage units spread across 7 states. There was one thing that Detective Hunt could not figure out until this day, right now. As I tell this story, there is one more loose end. What changed 18 years ago? Why did they change their MO? Detective Hunt cross-referenced everything. Who was helping them abduct these children? That is when I figured it out. Well, it was something I just felt. Do you want to know? Okay, I'll tell you. It has been about 6 months since the takedown. This was the weirdest affair Colorado had ever seen. Jenny, Frankie, and Robert tried to move on, but it was almost impossible because their life was now on every news station. Frankie tried moving twice, with the same result. One day, Robert was visiting, and he and Frankie were talking when it happened. Something Robert said caught Frankie's attention, and he knew. The only way Robert could know that was if he was a part of it. Frankie bought a gun for protection, and he tried to act normally as he went for it. He slid the drawer open as Robert watched. Oh no, it was gone. Frankie looked up and Robert motioned him to sit down. The end? Or was this all an obscure recollection? R.I.P. Michael Brent Haddix. I want to dedicate this one to my brother. At 6:30 p.m. Saturday, my brother passed away. He had been battling liver failure for 2 years. Thanks everyone at Reedsy. You guys really are my friends and colleagues. I found writing and left alcoholism behind. This community has been my therapy to keep me away from this disease. I miss you already, Michael. Just another dead girl underwater. Trigger warning. Implications of death, violence, and sexual harassment. By the time the fisherman finds me, I will have been dead for 33 hours, 6 minutes, and 29 seconds. 18 hours since the police declared me missing. 15 hours since Zoe told my biology teacher that my tent was empty, that I hadn't returned from the party we'd snuck out to the night before. Careful, quiet, every twig a possible snitch. It was exhilarating, our hearts pounding, the smell of pine and seaweed thick in the air, and the moon a perfectly curved sickle. Zoe held my sweaty hand and didn't let go until we'd passed the tents and joined the others by the lake. The music on someone's phone was turned down just low enough for us to make out Billie Eilish's raspy voice. One of the guys offered us a beer, kept cool in the pitch-black lurking water. I remember thinking I couldn't tell where the lake ended and the forest began. The first article, published by a local newspaper, reads, "Promising high school student missing after night swim in lake." Shortly after, the Water Rescue Service and Fire Brigade take over the search. Dogs comb the area, their noses trailing through the damp earth. A human chain forms, people moving slowly through the woods, eyes scanning for any sign of me. Even a helicopter hovers overhead, its whirring blades slicing through the heavy, charged air. The search drags on for hours, stretching into the twilight, yet the woods remain silent. The police begin to ask questions. When was she last seen? What was she wearing? Had she been drinking? Did she seem out of character? Angry? Sad? Suicidal? No, and no. She was singing. She was dancing. She seemed happy. When the fisherman finds my body, miles away from where I was last seen, certainty sets in. The autopsy reveals a hematoma on my head and purple spots behind my ears. The coroners examine the water in my lungs and confirm that I wasn't dead before entering the water. I died by drowning. My classmates are questioned again. Zoe claims to have left early, while I stayed behind with her twin brother, Tom, who has been in love with me since middle school. Tom's behavior strikes the police as odd. He insists he barely spoke to me, despite people seeing us leave the party together for a few minutes. When my body is examined, traces of Tom's skin are found on my clothes, trapped between the fabric layers. Still, Tom sticks to his story, perhaps because the truth would embarrass him for some reason. Or maybe he's just afraid of the questions that would follow and the scrutiny that might come with them. Tom is right, in the broadest sense. We really only exchanged 3 or 4 sentences that night, but only because Tom's mouth was otherwise occupied with me. I had enjoyed every second of it, and looking back, I wish I'd given him a real chance. But I was too worried about what other people might think. So, as usual, I brushed him off, leaving him to walk away from the party feeling hurt. Cassandra insists she heard Zoe and me arguing that night, just before Zoe headed back to the campsite. According to her, we were fighting over Tom. Of course she would say that. What else would 2 girls argue about if not a boy? Cassandra even claims that Zoe pushed me, though Zoe denies it vehemently. She denies discussing Tom at all, insisting it was about something else, something that wouldn't come to light until much later, when our biology teacher became a suspect. But Cassandra holds firm to her version. The thing about Cassandra is that she's always been a shadow, the kind of girl whose name teachers forget after 2 weeks of spring break. Kelly, Cindy, Carrie, something with a C though, right? So, when she finally gets the chance to talk to the police and be part of the investigation, she jumps at it. Unfortunately, Cassandra isn't much help to the investigators. She leaves the party at 2 a.m., just 40 minutes before I die, leaving me alone with a group of guys who've brought along some tranquilizers. Sitting next to them felt like being stuck in a fever dream, where Jacques Derrida explains quantum physics at a frat party. At some point, I decided it was time to head back. One of the guys casually asked if I needed someone to walk with me, and I said yes, but no one moved. I glanced back, the campsite faintly visible through the cold, white light filtering through the pines. It was only a few meters away, just beyond the trees. I'd walk this path for days, never once feeling threatened by the shadows in the bushes. But tonight, that sinking feeling in my stomach wouldn't go away. Still, I refused to be that girl, the one who got scared at every creak in the dark. the one who needed someone to hold her hand for a few steps. So I stood up and said I'd walk alone. Instead of sticking to the dark trail, though, I decided to take a small detour along the riverbank, a bit longer, a bit lighter, and hopefully a bit safer. One of the guys told me to text him when I made it to my tent, but when I didn't, no one even noticed. 16 days after my death, suspicion begins to shift toward our biology teacher. Devin, one of my classmates, reveals that he had felt ill that night and went looking for the teacher's tent, only to find it empty. Soon after, the teacher's behavior takes a strange turn. He starts making inconsistent statements that don't add up. One day, he calls Zoe into his office after class, where he insists that his earlier proposal to her, before the trip, had been nothing but a joke. She understood that, right? It was sarcasm, he says, claiming that what he really meant was that if she wanted to improve her grades, she should consider attending a tutoring service. And this is where Cassandra steps in for the final time. She confesses that she visited our biology teacher after the party, and that they went to the boathouse, where, according to her, nothing bad happened. He was just there for me. The biology teacher is immediately suspended, but the case against him has nothing to do with mine, as Cassandra's alibi clears him. Meanwhile, the suspicions surrounding Zoe and Tom are too weak to pursue. My case remains unsolved, and eventually people begin to accept the idea that it was just a tragic accident, that I must have hit my head when I jumped into the water. They agree that I seemed unhappy, not just that night, but in general, and that my relationship with my parents, who expected me to excel in everything, was strained. Perhaps the pressure had finally got to her. It's all unsatisfying, of course. Unsatisfying for the local magazine, whose updates eventually dry up. Unsatisfying for the police, left with yet another unsolved case on their desk. Unsatisfying for my parents, who, decades later, will say in an interview that not a day goes by that they don't think of their little girl. Maybe one day, a classmate will write a college essay about my case, reflecting on how it taught them that life can end in an instant. Maybe my story will end up on a true crime podcast, or perhaps Netflix will stretch it into a tightly structured 8-episode miniseries where my body is discovered just 3 minutes in, enough time for viewers to decide if they'll keep watching, or maybe none of this happens and I'll fade away, like countless other women who are silenced every day simply for being born the wrong sex. It doesn't matter who profits from my story. It doesn't even matter if they eventually find the 2 men I crossed paths with on my way back to the campsite, in the wrong place at the wrong time. None of this matters, because in the end, I'm just another dead girl underwater, son of Satan. I awoke to a bright light streaming through a crack in one of the wooden boards I had put up in a paranoid, booze-infused haze. It was June, and the heat was stifling. My mouth was the kind of dry where your cheeks and lips stick to your teeth, the leftover taste of alcohol offensive. I sat up slowly, the usual nausea kicking in, my head pounding, room spinning. I looked down at my shaky hands, trying to steady myself as I half rolled off the couch. A sweaty silhouette of me left behind, my shirt stuck to me. I stumbled to the kitchen, only allowing one eye open to keep things in focus, my head down as I waited for the kettle to boil, impatient as the usual hangxiety kicked in. I knew my drinking was a problem, it always has been. But as I'm nearing 40 now, the mornings are becoming more unpleasant and unmanageable. But I know I'll never stop. I put 2 big scoops of coffee and boiling water into a mug, topping it off with a shot of vodka. I downed it and made another, willing the shakes to stop, my eyes blurry and stomach churning. I took the second mug back to the couch and turned on the TV, slowly coming back to life. My mind was quieter today, a numbness over the usual paranoia or anger that resides in me. Sometimes I think it's a darkness, straight from the pits of hell, the angel on one shoulder missing. As long as I could remember, I had been plagued with dark thoughts, a curse passed down from my abusive father, a life of isolation and self-sabotage, sending me spiraling further into this abyss over the years. Some days, I think I can snap out of it or have a small voice telling me I need help and that maybe there's still hope for me. But this had just become a way of life for me now, my norm. I had come to accept it. Alcohol and Netflix were my only friends. I sustained an easy work-from-home job that only stole a few hours each day. My manager didn't bother me, and I didn't bother him. He didn't care as long as I hit the numbers, which I always did. It didn't pay much, but kept a roof over my head and supplied my vices. I flicked straight to the news channel like I did every day. There had been a string of murders in the city, and now they were saying, there is a pattern suggesting that it's the work of serial killer. I shivered, watching as they wheeled a sixth victim in a body bag, a one-way trip to the morgue. My head pounded again. I swallowed some paracetamol with a swig of vodka, not taking my eyes off the TV. The killings had been brutal. I watched along each time with a morbid curiosity, like I was watching a fictional Netflix series about serial killers, almost forgetting that these were people living in the same city I am. All victims were female, early 20s, normally Good Samaritan types, people with a squeaky clean record who wouldn't have even stolen a pack of gum in their short life. Most were religious and attended church on a Sunday. I'd be safe, standing at 6 feet, fashioning a Jesus-length beard and enough petty crimes on my record to piss off anyone in law enforcement. The media were raving about the symbolism the killer left behind and had even given him a nickname, Son of Satan. It doesn't quite have the same ring as Jack the Ripper or the Zodiac Killer, but they were just scratching the surface of what he does and what he is capable of. This guy was different. According to reporters, he stalks his victims over the course of 6 days, leaving satanic symbolism in his midst. Never leaves a trace of evidence, other than gifts of animal bones or a pentagram, sometimes an upside-down cross, all with no fingerprints or so much as a wisp of hair. The symbols were the only thing that changed from kill to kill. The 6-day stalk, bondage of the hands and feet, and 6 stab wounds to the heart were always consistent. I shivered again. On the dark web, some crime scene photos were leaked and spread vastly around social media. The bloody sights, something out of a horror movie. I chugged another glass of vodka. The police had nothing. They made an educated guess that it could be a male in their 30s or 40s. Probably some crazy religious guy that they had depicted as some skinny, sad sod who lives in their mother's basement. I rolled my eyes and half chuckled, a wheezy sound that made me cough. One thing they all agreed on was that the killer was clever and meticulous. He taunted his victims and he taunted police, never leaving a trace. All they could do was warn people to be safe and on guard. If anyone experienced any stalking or hints that they were next, were to report to police straight away. Boy, are they not ready for the amount of calls they're about to receive. The fear the media have installed does half the job for the killer. I rolled my eyes again, pouring another glass, slightly amused by the stupidity of law enforcement and media. I turned it off and opened my laptop to get on with some work before heading out to the shop. The bills aren't going to pay themselves. Completing work in record time, I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face, then finally brushed the rancid taste away swallowing some toothpaste for good measure. I looked up at the disheveled guy staring back. Hair awry, bags hung heavy around my dark pinpoint-like eyes, the spit of my father. I inwardly groaned, my heart palpitating slightly. I changed into some dark tracksuits, tamed my hair with cap and donned some sunglasses. I whistled as I walked outside, sweat pouring from my skin, the back of my neck clammy. I gritted my teeth with discomfort, while the sun beat down harder, the whistling a distraction. The streets were mostly empty, a few dog walkers and cars dotted around. I found myself at the shop and enjoyed the cool feel of air conditioning, taking a long breath in. I picked up the essentials: vodka, fags, and instant noodles, the economy making every transaction feel painful. I felt that rage again as I tapped my card and stormed out, trying to calm my thoughts, and drank the first bottle on my way back. Needing a pit stop, I paused on a bench, starting on my second bottle and chain smoking, until I felt sick and black spots started to cloud my sight. My head hurt as evil thoughts and feelings flooded me. I eventually stumbled home, unsure how I got there and why it was so dark out already. I tripped over my own feet and crashed onto the couch face first, full blackness taking over. I was in and out of consciousness for several days, time missing as I looked at my watch and realized nearly a week had gone by. I really need to stop drinking. I went to the kitchen. Coffee, vodka, couch. The routine continued. I turned the TV on, and yet another murder had occurred, less than a mile from my home. Same pattern for the most part. I smirked and flicked to the next channel. Headline: Son of Satan breaks pattern. My eyebrows creased and my heart rate picked up. Killer stabs victim 6 times to the abdomen, left the house in disarray. Forensics have bagged new evidence. That couldn't be right. My father's voice boomed in my head. I switched to another channel. Son of Satan copycat killer. New information has come to light as detectives connect current killings with a string of murders with similar symbolism and pattern that happened 30 years ago in the countryside. Killer was never found. The voice boomed louder. I ran to the bathroom to throw up and realized my clothes were soaked with blood. I fucked up. My father would be writhing in his grave. His idiot son carrying on his legacy gets caught because he can't handle his booze. I threw up again. Panic rose and I gripped my chest as I struggled to breathe, spots of lights in my vision. The room was closing in. I turned on the shower, holding onto the sink with one hand, ripping off my clothes with the other, before allowing the scalding hot water to wash away my sins. "I'm sorry," I screamed, the disappointment of my dead dad all too much. I sobbed on the floor of the shower, shame and guilt ripping me apart. Red and blue lights flashed past my window, snapping me awake, and I stood up, getting ready run, fight or flight kicking in. Bang, bang, bang! My front door rattled. Panic-stricken, I scrambled for my clothes and slipped, the alcohol haze wearing off. My head hurt as it hit the sink on my way down. I couldn't move. The room was spinning. A louder bang. Footsteps. I faded out, dig deep. Other than a faint glow coming from one of the back rooms, the town's charity shop was in darkness, its front door firmly closed. Although it had opened in 1985, the building had been used commercially since the 1800s, when it had variously been a pharmacy, a bank, and a tavern. The shop was close to the river in Marpleton, a pleasant English market town which had once been home to a nearby priory. In ancient times, monks had wandered back and forth to sell their wares at a market which still existed in diminished form across the road. Regulars were now peering through the shop window, but the main lights stayed off. A few of the shop's helpers were huddled in the back room. Patrick, the treasurer, had collected the spare keys from the greengrocer to let them in. The gatherers were addressing one topic, namely, why their long-serving manager, Rhea, had failed to open up the day before. "I just can't understand it," Ivy, one of the shop's founding members, said. "I've never known her not to turn up, unless she's on holiday. In all the years I've known Rhea, she's never had a day's sickness." "Wasn't she going to New Zealand to visit her sister?" Patrick asked. "She was, but not until the following week. It's in the shop diary. Here, take a look." Ivy tapped the relevant pages meaningfully. "I'm not doubting you, Ivy, but she may have got the dates wrong. She wasn't in the habit of making mistakes." Ivy's loyalty knew no bounds. Patrick adopted a different approach. "You've tried Rhea's landline, I take it?" "Several times. Each time it went straight to answer phone." "Right. Still, I expect we're worrying over nothing." "But you have to admit she has been a bit distracted lately," someone piped up. Patrick turned to Silvana hopefully, but she shook her head. "I've tried her on her mobile, but nothing." Silvana was a refugee who had joined the shop 2 years earlier. Since Rhea had taken her under her wing when she first came to England, her English had improved markedly. Silvana had been on the verge of admitting her true feelings for Rhea. Reality had crushed the likelihood of her returning to her homeland anytime soon and been replaced by something entirely unexpected. An overwhelming love for another human being. Silvana's great wish was to know whether that love was returned. Rhea clearly liked her, but was it worth risking their friendship for more? The path to such an admission seemed littered with obstacles. Now, the mystery of Rhea's whereabouts could be added to an already growing list. "Did Rhea say anything about changing her holiday plans, Silvana?" Patrick asked, determined to get to the bottom of things. "Number I went to her house for my lesson last Wednesday. She told me she'd be away all next week." Silvana had considered the matter carefully. "Yes, that is so." Patrick said. "I guess I'll have to contact the area manager about reopening the shop." "You'll need to do that. Volunteer phone numbers are stored in the locked cabinet, and only Rhea has the key," Ivy interjected. "Head office have contact numbers too." Everyone knew Rhea always carried a set of keys on a fob attached to a waistband. Patrick joked she secretly had a cellar key for the shop's more trying customers, to which he'd received an enigmatic smile. The actual cellar key had supposedly vanished in the mists of time. Certainly, there was no call to use the cellar with ample storage space elsewhere. In any case, the cellar door was kept permanently locked, preventing anyone getting trapped if there was a fire. Patrick scrutinized the rota sheets. "Maybe Judd would be willing to help if we reopen the shop," he suggested. Silvana, who distrusted Judd, said nothing. 3 months earlier, dressed in black jeans and hoodie and trailed by a mournful cocker spaniel, Judd had shown up to inquire about volunteering. When Silvana had bent to pat his dog, it had backed off whimpering. "She gets nervous round new people," Judd had explained. Tucking away the banking money, Patrick had gone to fetch Rhea. "A young man's inquiring about volunteering," he'd told her. "Shall I send him through?" "What's he like?" Rhea was wearily tapping information into the computer at her desk. "He seems pleasant enough. His dog's rather nervous." Rhea massaged her aching neck. "Send him through," she said. Rhea had confided in Silvana about her difficulty in getting references for Judd Dig Deep. Eventually, he'd presented her with 2 typed ones, supposedly from an ex-employer. With typical thoroughness, Rhea had rung one of the numbers to learn more about the new helper. When a voice answered sounding suspiciously like Judd's, she'd intended to investigate further. However, other things had intervened. A few weeks after this uncharacteristic omission, Judd was indeed proving to be an asset. Willing to turn his hand to anything, it was a relief not having to lift heavy sacks and boxes donated by the public from one end of the shop to the other. With little guidance, Judd had transformed one of the sorting rooms, leaving it immaculate. One evening, when Silvana cycled past the back of the shop, she noticed a group of undesirables hanging with Judd, engrossed in conversation. She hurried past, hoping she hadn't been seen. She raised her concerns to Rhea, who told her it was nothing to worry about, that she'd keep an eye on things, and bafflingly added, "I'd rather you didn't mention this to anyone else." The day the shop reopened, without Rhea at the helm, was Silvana's birthday. Patrick invited her to join him later for one of his wife's specials, homemade pizza and pear wine. The food tasted delicious, but she pushed her plate to one side. "You're still worried about Rhea, aren't you?" Patrick observed. "Her cell phone is dead. It's strange. I knocked on her door last night, but still no answer." Patrick got up. "I tell you what, I happen to know Rhea's neighbor, Angela, from the book club. She looks after the garden when Rhea goes away. She may well have a spare key. I'm sure there's nothing to worry about, but it wouldn't do any harm to check if everything is all right." Silvana was relieved. "That's a great idea, thanks, Patrick. I've been known to have a few in my time. Come on, get your coat. Let's see if we can solve this mystery." Half an hour later, the pair were standing in Rhea's house. The hallway led into an open-plan kitchen diner with gleaming countertops and state-of-the-art gadgets. The smell of coffee lingered invitingly. When Rhea's partner Lindsay had died 5 years earlier, she'd left her with a generous insurance payout. Silvana sighed, remembering the other day when she and Rhea had drawn close over a bottle of wine. Rhea had even given her a present. "Only to be opened on your birthday," she instructed. But beneath the gaiety, she'd been out of sorts. Rhea had brushed aside Silvana's offer of help with a brisk, "I'm fine." "I'll check down here if you do upstairs," Patrick said, jolting Silvana back to the present. The passport was lying on the bedside table. However, the photograph bore little resemblance to the person Silvana had come to love and admire. Having spent time working for a private detective agency when she was younger, instinct overrode caution, and she began a meticulous search for clues. Predictably, Rhea's shop keys were lying on the bedside table. More unexpected was the discovery of another set of keys attached to a ring with a tag labeled "Cellar." "Are you all right?" Patrick called up from the bottom of the staircase. "I'm okay." Silvana tucked the cellar keys into her bag. Then she remembered Rhea's present and opened it. She was surprised to find a pay-as-you-go phone already charged up. "Well?" Patrick exclaimed. "Did you find anything?" "Just this." She gave him the passport. "That's odd. It appears she never made it to New Zealand after all. Maybe it's time to involve the police." "What? Right now?" "It is rather late. I doubt they'll want to be disturbed tonight." Patrick thought of the half-opened bottle of wine waiting back home. "I'll act tomorrow morning. Shall I walk you back?" "No need. I can take care of myself," Silvana said firmly. The moon was her only companion as Silvana descended the cellar steps at the back of the shop. With growing unease, she encased her hands in a pair of gloves and took off her shoes. She didn't want anyone to know of her presence. After 3 attempts, the door creaked open and she was met by a cloying damp, overlaid by something else. Something unpleasant. Tensing, she flicked on her phone torch and spotted a narrow corridor with another door at the end. Filled with foreboding, she slowly turned the handle. She smelt the body before she saw it. Wearing the trademark hoodie, the bloating, discolored thing in front of her, could hardly be called human. Judd lay slumped against an upturned table, his eyes staring and opaque. Silvana covered her face with a handkerchief to prevent retching and inspected the scene, noting the bloodied head and smashed vase lying beside it. The blood had pooled and dried, staining the clothes and floor. She was no expert, but if the rotting undertones were anything to go by, death had probably occurred a few days earlier. Even then, horror was blunted by relief. So long as it wasn't Rhea, she had the strength for anything. But where was Rhea? Adjusting to the dimness, Silvana tried to make sense of her surroundings. Some crudely constructed shelves filled with storage tubs and packets lay stacked against one of the walls. The place was obviously some kind of drugs den. Could Judd's death have been the result of a disagreement with other gang members? Silvana's stomach lurched. What if they turned up and found her? She'd only just locked the cellar door and picked up her shoes when she heard voices on the driveway. Somehow, she managed to scramble behind one of the bins underneath the fire escape. Hardly daring to breathe, she waited until the scuffling feet passed and the gang disappeared down the cellar steps. Then, she bolted into the night as fast as her trembling legs would carry her. She would decide what to do when she got home. Halfway across the town's park, muffled ringtones came from her bag. "Silvana?" The voice was clear as day at the other end of the line. "Rhea, is it really you? Thank God. Are you all right? Where are you calling from? Talk to me." "If I tell you, you must keep it to yourself," Rhea said urgently. "Of course. By the way, I have your keys." "The shop keys?" "The cellar keys. Long story. I have just been down there. I found him. Judd. Dead. It was horrible." Silvana began to laugh hysterically as the shock kicked in. "You went into the cellar?" Rhea repeated. "Why?" "I needed to know if you were all right. I was so afraid I was going to find you, not him. When I saw your passport, I knew you couldn't have gone abroad, that something must have happened. I didn't get the chance." "What happened?" "I will tell you, but not now. Not on the phone. Patrick is planning to go to the police tomorrow about your passport." Rhea asked. "Did you touch anything when you went into the cellar? Did you touch him?" "No." Silvana's teeth were chattering from shock. "It's cold outside. I was wearing gloves. But what do you know about Judd?" "Why were you wearing gloves?" "I don't know. I had a bad feeling. I didn't want to be implicated in anything. Back home, I once worked at a detective agency. I learned about not touching crime scenes." "You may want to call the police," Rhea said. "But please, can I ask you not to tell them I got in contact or about me giving you the phone? We'll meet soon. That is, if you want to. I'll understand if you don't want anything more to do with me." "Of course I want to meet you." It seemed silly pretending now. "It's all I think about." Silvana's heart flipped when she saw the distant figure standing on the pier below. The matinee performance at the Pavilion Theater was in full swing, and the pier was almost deserted. She came up behind Rhea, patting her on the shoulder. "Hey!" Rhea turned, instantly relaxing when she saw her friend. "Hey!" Silvana sank into Rhea's arms. For a long time, the pair embraced. "It's so good to see you," Silvana said. "Likewise." Rhea glanced round. "Does anyone know you're here?" "Number, and I'm so hungry." Rhea grinned. "How about some fish and chips? I'll treat you." You mean the famous English fish and chips? Rhea grinned. I've discovered a great place on the front. She linked arms with Silvana. Come on, let's eat. Then, I'll tell you everything. Judd was a bad lot, Rhea admitted later. He was running a drug racket, and I threatened to report him to the police. It doesn't surprise me. But how did you find out? Not long after I joined the shop, I was clearing up one of the back rooms and came across a discarded cabinet. There were 2 sets of cellar keys in it. I never told anyone about them, partly because I didn't want a lot of fuss. I wanted to keep it to myself. Unfortunately, Judd caught me coming up the stairs one evening and demanded to store his things there. I didn't like the way he spoke to me. When I refused, he threatened to torture his dog in front of me. He implied if I didn't comply, I'd be next. His eyes were so cold. For the second time in my life, I felt real fear. There would be time enough to ask about the first time, Silvana thought, clasping Rhea's hand. I'm afraid there's more, Rhea said dully. You probably won't want anything to do with me when you hear the rest. Silvana clutched Rhea's hand more tightly. She'd come too far to be brushed aside. Why don't you let me be the judge of that? She said firmly. Whatever it is, we'll bear it together. You see, I love you. I need you to know that. You do? For a moment, Rhea's face shone. That's a relief, she said, laughing. I thought it was just me. Did you? Silvana laughed too. I may have had my suspicions, but I didn't want to say anything. Oh, I'm so happy, Silvana said. But hold your horses before we get carried away, Rhea warned. Hold my horses? An English expression. It means don't count your chickens. Count my chickens? Silvana, my love, let me finish my story before you say anything. Okay, sorry. Silvana nibbled a stray chip. Rhea was smiling in spite of everything. In the end, I couldn't stand being held to ransom by a bully like Judd. A few days ago, I foolishly decided to confront him in the cellar. He went to grab a knife from the table. There was an old jar on one of the shelves, and as he turned, I smashed it over his head. She shuddered. I couldn't tell you all this, but I made sure you had the phone before I left. I hoped you'd stay in touch. The day after, I headed here. Not wanting to be traced, I paid for everything with cash. But surely the police will realize you only acted in self-defense, Silvana insisted. Perhaps I should have gone to them straight away, but I couldn't face it. Rhea's hesitation was palpable. Especially considering what? In spite of the warmth between them, Silvana felt a sudden chill, like someone walking over a grave. What aren't you telling me? Rhea's voice broke. I'm terminally ill. At best, I only have months to live. At worst, it will be weeks. I have all the medication I need. I just want to spend my last days in a place with happy memories. I can't believe it. But Silvana knew Rhea was speaking the truth. She tried to disguise her anguish. How long have you known? She whispered. I only found out for certain the day before Judd threatened me in the cellar. Maybe I wasn't thinking straight. I should have told the police everything long before, but by then I was in too deep. I'm going to stay with you. Silvana had never been more certain of anything. Rhea shook her head. Stay with me tonight and go back tomorrow. It won't be long before the police check the cellar. It will look odd if you're not there. I have every faith in your survival skills. Look how far you've come. In the meantime, there's something I want you to have. What is it? Rhea handed Silvana 2 envelopes. Inside one is a plan of the cellar. After years of searching, I think I may have finally uncovered the sealed entrance to a tunnel leading to the old priory. My father was a historian and suspected there might be one near the shop. The other is a copy of my will. It's my final and dearest wish to make your life better when I've gone, petrified. You would never have noticed it if you weren't looking for it. That was precisely the point. The instructions given in my embroidery group had been clear enough. After nightfall, take a stroll on the second lane past the bakery, look for the unlit lamppost, and turn down that dark alley, they said in hushed voices as the pianist began playing in sudden loud fervor, by coincidence. Then you will see a mossy stone staircase, which you will descend, and at the end of it, there is a dim hallway. She lives through the set of green doors on the left. The doors are tall and French like my husband's mistress, but peeling and weathered. I can tell they were once painted a lovely shade of emerald green. Half of that green paint lies in small piles of flakes on the cobblestone. I debate knocking and decide instead to reach with false confidence for the rusted copper handle. It turns downward easily. A small bell rings and echoes. Welcome. On the poster she is grotesque, an example of how time and sin turn a person sour. But in person she has the kind of enduring beauty you can't tear your eyes away from. Do come in, darling. Don't be shy. Contrary to popular belief, I don't bite, although I can't say nothing here does. Her voice is like a wind chime, melodic and resonating, barely brushing over the crashing waves of her words. I wonder if I'm here too long, if that voice will drag me out to deep sea. Or did that only work on men in the myths? Take a seat, love. Yes, there is perfect. Would you like a cup of tea? Well, it's never too late for tea, is it now? I enjoy it late into the night myself, but maybe you've been raised more proper than that. Here, the cup is warm, not hot. If she noticed my shaking hands when reaching for it, she didn't say a word. It takes more than a few seconds for my eyes to adjust to the warmly lit room after a dark and shadowy street. Among her many talents, it cannot be said that she was a good decorator. The shabby boards of the walls are empty, but for an assortment of faded newspaper clippings from the highlights of her anonymous career. Obituaries, mostly. A tattered blue curtain with tassels hangs behind the armchair she's perched in, dividing off part of the room. Eccentrically painted shelves house arrays of books and bottles of objects my gaze prefers not to settle on. She would have been called a witch for her collections had she not already acquired numerous more colorful nicknames by the public. The only item of some value is worn loosely around her slender wrist, a heavy and ornate gold watch, the kind of thing that would make a petty thief's day to see glinting underneath a man's sleeve in the street. She catches me admiring it and smiles thinly, holding up her arm up to eye level. Isn't it a beauty? It was my first husband's, this watch. On the 10th anniversary of his death, I'm going to smash it to bits and melt the gold into a necklace for myself. I deserve a little gift from him, I think. Her laugh unnerves me, but I find myself too curious to be afraid. I politely say my condolences for her husband's death. Oh, darling, don't be sorry that that man is dead. The one good thing he did was to be the inspiration for the charity work I do. I haven't always done this. I used to be an actress, you know, a leading lady of the stage. Men would come from all over the city to see my shows, for I was beautiful then. Sometimes after the shows, they would approach me, usually blind drunk, complimenting my dress or what was underneath it, asking for a kiss or a drink or a night. And sometimes they didn't ask. My husband became my husband not because he asked, but because he damaged me. and he was rich enough to get away with it, and clever enough to know that marriage was my only option. She smooths down the skirt of her maroon dress, then looks up at me with a solemn expression I can't fully read. It isn't hard to believe she was once a sought-after woman. Though sunken in age, her cheeks are smooth and her face looks as though it was hand-carved out of porcelain by God. Her hair is twisted into a dark crown atop her head, secured with metallic pins. Her eyes are like a cat's, but not a house cat. No, definitely not. Like those of a tiger that has been left to go hungry for far too long. I will her to continue talking and not look at me with those eyes again. We sip our tea in unison, upholding our masquerade as ladies. She takes in a breath. He said he loved me, and at the beginning I believed it. He may have loved me. He certainly desired me. I think mostly he loved seeing the desire and jealousy of other men when he told them I was his wife. But that got old fast. So did I, in his eyes. When it had been a year and I still had not given him a child, I turned ugly to him, and he acted ugly accordingly. One night, he came home from the pub talking about how the other men's wives had filled their houses with children by now. He spoke of babies like cattle. Then he threatened that he ought to tell the whole town that I was secretly a whore and leave me. I should have kept quiet and obeyed and smothered him in his sleep, like a good wife. Instead, I promised him that as long as I was alive, I would never let a child be born cursed enough to have him as a father. I'm sure you know what happens next. Or otherwise, you wouldn't be here, my darling. She traces a scar on her chin that I hadn't noticed before, extending along her jaw to the start of the delicate bones of her neck. I imagine it snaking around the rest of her throat in a ring, strangling her pale skin, and my breath catches. It looks as if lightning struck her. She was struck, though not by something as rare as lightning. I instinctively touch my collarbone where I know without looking there is a ghastly bruise. My modest neckline covers it, but somehow it feels like she knows it's there. My mark of pain. I hope it goes away quickly so my husband does not think me unsightly. But then again, perhaps that will not be necessary. I nod at her meekly to show that I do know what happens next. I can't say whether he truly meant to kill me, but to hurt me, to wound me, to make my thoughts and words disappear in flames. He meant that with all his heart. The funny thing is, it was him who made my words true. Of course, he couldn't have known that I was with child. Even I did not know then. After, no one would ever get to know. I made a gravestone, although there was nothing to bury. And then, a month later, I buried my poor sick husband next to it, marked only with a slab that did not bear his name. Wealthy and beloved as his gold in his life, in death he became only stone. The disease had taken him so quickly that there was no time for anyone to save him. Shame on chance to take him from this world so young. Got him like poison, essentially. The porcelain around her eyes cracks faintly in amusement. I have nothing to say in response, my mind stuck on the picture of a crude gravestone smaller than it should be. Now, love, how would you like your tragedy to occur? The widows in my town all chose differently. Most agreed that the worst methods are only to be used for the worst husbands, but sometimes there is no rhyme or reason to it. After all, all's fair in love and war. Millions of second and third and fourth thoughts crossed my mind on the way here, but now those voices are silent, and there is only mine and hers, and the input of the hissing wind outside. Well, what will it be? In 2 weeks, it will happen. On the way home after a day of work, my husband will feel a bout of hopelessness that gives him a nudge to hurl himself off of the local bridge. The river below is not a kind one, especially to those who never learned to swim. He will have been drunk, since he often is, and everyone knows how he gets when he's drunk. No one will discuss a death as taboo as taking your own life. My children and I will cry and wear black for weeks, though no longer than what is expected. At the same time, the black of our bruises will fade. He won't be missed very much, really. Perhaps that French woman will miss him, but she would have met the man that I knew soon enough. I will decide to raise my children in the countryside alone, and we will be happy. I cannot say yet whether I will regret it. The final time I will see the woman's wild tiger's eyes, she will tell me that not once has she regretted anything in her life. She will say that it was a pleasure to do it, and fearfully I will believe her. Oh, it really is getting late, love. Your family must be at home expecting you. I reply that they are, and I thank her for her kindness, nervously reaching to shake her hand. How much blood has coated it? On the posters, they say she has killed 3 men, but I know these were simply the times she wanted it enough to make it gruesome. The posters also envision her as grotesque, which means that they have not ever seen her, or the mark on her jaw from her fall after being struck by lightning. The posters know nothing. The men know nothing. We women must stick together, yes? The image of my young daughter appears and consumes my mind. I would do everything in my power to ensure she never has to know the instructions to get here. There will be no scars for my girl to trace. I will make sure of that. I nod and drop the woman's unassuming porcelain hand. Beneath the sound of her wind chime voice is a softer noise I hadn't paid attention to before, almost like a breeze rustling through dying trees, overlaid with the humming of the earth. It is separate from the wind and the rushing of my blood. She notices my piqued interest, and rather than say anything, stands, chuckles, and regally draws back the tattered blue curtain behind her. In view now is a cage filled with twisting and writhing scaled bodies, hissing and competing with each other for air. They move as one, a trembling monster of green. I step back in sudden horror. She isn't looking at me, but I see her eyes flash ravenously. You don't have to worry about them, darling. Their venom is reserved for the venomous, the heist connoisseur. I exited the world of Coca-Cola at 2:19 p.m. No sweat, no fear. After all, I've stolen from the greatest museums in the world. That said, my pocket did feel heavier. The one with my phone, which contained a picture of the original Coca-Cola secret formula. Only 2 senior executives know the formula entirely at any given time. It's that secret. Well, now there are 3. I crossed Baker Street onto Centennial Olympic Park. I scanned without appearing to scan and noticed 2 men in black suits. I increased my pace without drawing attention to myself. Could they be from the museum? Surely not. I would have noticed. Over the last 6 weeks, I've patiently cased the famous tourist trap, working as an electrician, my original calling, before becoming the world's most notorious burglar. I prefer heist connoisseur, but the FBI won't use it. To them, I'm just an ordinary thief. It's so hard to build one's brand. I stopped and sat on a park bench. The suits looked uncomfortable with my sudden inaction. They slowed but maintained their direction. They were following me. My photographic memory flipped through the museum's security personnel, and those 2 were not there. I got up and walked to them. We were surrounded by kids playing, lovers holding hands, and walkers listening to mumbled headphones. These 2 won't make a scene. I, on the other hand, will. It was easier to disappear in chaos. "I love pizza on mountain roads if it's December," I said, looking in the opposite direction of the startled pair. "What?" one of the suits said. "Come on. You must give the counter response or I'm out of here." They both squirmed. I couldn't have shocked them more had I stripped down to my tighty-whities and danced. "We don't know what you're talking about." They attempted to move past me, but I intercepted them. "All right, enough games. Why are you following me?" They looked around as if trying to find the hidden candid camera. "Face recognition. We've been sent to verify." "Me? Which notorious criminal do I look like?" "Don Bard." "The heist connoisseur." They tensed up. I tipped my hand. Only the FBI and I know that moniker, even if they pretend they don't. The suits drew their guns. I had already seen 2 police officers standing near a hot dog cart only a stone's throw from us. I shouted "gun" and pointed at the 2 suits. The police officers reacted quickly. "Put the weapons down!" they shouted with their guns aimed at the men in black. The neckties dropped their guns and raised their hands. In the confusion, I disappeared among several walkers running from the chaos. I never looked back, but I overheard the 2 suits yelling, "We're FBI." I must be slipping. I know better than to allow a Big Brother camera to get a full view of my face. Perhaps I'm getting too old for this. It may be time to retire. They say you should retire at the pinnacle of your career. Is there any higher pinnacle than the Coke formula? The suits and cops should have made peace by now. I doubled back and sat on a bench, never leaving the park. The best place to hide is where you begin. No one ever thinks to look where they lost you. Now that I could sit peacefully, it was time to get the nerd working to sell this picture. "I've got the pic," the nerd texted back. "On it." How much is this adventure worth? Coke's retained earnings are a little shy of $75 billion. Imagine $75 billion. Now imagine $100 million. Both are impossible for the average Joe to wrap his brain around. But I've done the math. 100 million is only 0.133% of Coke's available cash. Not even 1%. My phone vibrated. Coke says they won't pay. Not surprised. Move on to other buyers. It's a dangerous game Coke is playing. Someone might buy it. If no one does, I'll fling the formula over the web. Nomads in the Arabian Peninsula will make Coke in their tents. 10 minutes later, Musk backed out. Pepsi still on the fence. I once considered stealing the Mona Lisa. Its estimated value is $1 billion. Coke could buy 75 Mona Lisas, but it won't toss me a measly 100 million. Pepsi got cold feet, afraid of repercussions. Plan C? Yes. That took me aback. I have enough plans to go through the alphabet twice, but I believed Pepsi would buy it, if for no other reason than to gift it back to Coke as a goodwill gesture. Imagine the free advertising. And on top of that, Pepsi would be seen as the biggest-hearted corporation of all time. Apple wants it, says they're going to make it better, the nerd texted. I have my standards, no changing what has worked. Number go to plan D. What's wrong with that fruity company? And what's up with the bite out of the apple? Is it Eve's apple, the one that caused the fall of man? Now that I think about it, that is a good logo for them. I put down the phone and took in the beauty. Trees rustling, squirrels nibbling, birds singing. Of course, cars honking, people shouting, runners thudding, and sirens blaring accompanied the otherwise tranquil symphony. Buzz. TikTok made an offer. I may be a thief, but I'm a patriotic thief. No exclamation mark. I was beginning to believe I'd have to follow through on my threat to release the formula on the web. Then my eyes read the text I was hoping to see. Coke called back, says they will pay. I remained unaffected on the outside, but fireworks went off inside. I was about to score my largest heist. Who knew a soft drink formula would bring in more than crown jewels, famous diamonds, and priceless works of art combined? Well, me, but I hate to toot my own horn. Send the picture. No copy. They will know. The nerd texted. My hand was shaking a bit. I pushed send. Oops. It's been over 6 months since my oops. Since then, the 3 who knew the formula have grown to over 8 billion. Coke attempted a campaign to impugn the release as a hoax. However, it failed after people started to taste the formula's results. I left Atlanta for a mountainous area where there are no Big Brother cameras. My piddly few million will have to suffice for my retired years. How could I continue heisting after such a bumbling mistake? I have to face it. I'm no longer fit to be the heist connoisseur. Psst, Jill killed Jack. I very much need some socks, pretty please, with sugar on top. This was the text that I sent to my estranged ex-wife, the one who wanted to drag me out to the wilderness under the guise of talking about financing our first child's entrance into college. I knew that she was old-fashioned and wanted to push me from a hill, just like Fellini. So my last request was not very sinister. I mean, even death row inmates should get some free laundry or a meal, maybe even a prayer. I looked into the pantry of my rental and decided there was no good food. Bachelor food is disgusting when you leave it in the fridge for a week. I needed my dog. Hey, can we bring the dog? I knew that Caspian hated hiking just as much as me. It was like walking without purpose, like smelling flowers just to get allergies. I also knew that if Michelle threw me over a cliff and I was able to not immediately die, then Caspian the burner could theoretically pull me up with a rope. I decided to wear my flax Bermuda-styled shorts, which can be unwoven and turned into rope or a joint. She did not immediately text back and scold me for overpacking. This was a good sign because I had previously said I would find some kind of therapy. She wanted a stranger to break my will, make me cry, pay for the breaking, and send me back all trained. Also, I had a very large life insurance policy at the time. Husband therapy is kinda like dog training, but the wife forgets that she has to remember the commands, or the husband will forget, and the 2 weeks and $1,500 in Idaho won't take. She has to reinforce the electric shock therapy, the way the husband therapist swings a hand like windshield wipers and asks if my mother ever touched me inappropriately. It was just 38 minutes before the murder. Hike. In Knights of Calabria, Fellini taught us that a kind whore will get many marriage proposals, walk up to the mountain of love with all her savings, and get thrown over the mountain by her fake fiancé. I decided to pack like Fellini. I went up to my rented room and looked for all the things that could be lugged in a hefty garbage bag suitcase. There was the square bottle with a ship that my grandfather had constructed with tweezers. Nah, he's dead. There were piles of clothes on the ground. These kept me from bringing a drunk woman home. No one wants to make love next to dirty laundry. That's pretty gross if they do. I saw pictures of my kids when they were young and realized they were getting old, going to college, all taking medications to avoid giving me grandkids. I looked at the pillows. They were stiff, so I used them only to prop up a cell phone to watch Italian movies. It was better to pillow on a wad of sweaters and save the neck. I went into the closet and found my mafia money. It was just an envelope from the bank full of cash because I hate wasteful tipping. For some reason, the kids at the register have a very difficult time begging for tips of cash when they only punched in buttons. They do not have this problems with cards because they say, please follow the instructions on the screen when they ask for 30%, 40. One of the cashiers actually said my card was declined because he hit the 50% tip option for me. I use cash so the kids can beg like adults. There is no need for great cash when your former estranged spouse wants to go hiking in the wilderness. Also, I think she is bitter because of the dating. She pretends she doesn't mind that much, but always gets me drunk and asks for details. I don't know what I tell her half the time. I see a bottle of Canadian Mist, whiskey, that was purchased for toothaches and bladder infections. It is not a very good bottle of whiskey, but it is lightweight since half of it is missing. It is best to be slightly inebriated before being thrown off a cliff. Also, the fall hurts less. I packed the whiskey. Now my closet is executive clean. I have 10 handkerchiefs laid out in case one of the kids gets married. Handkerchiefs are the required minimum for a gentleman of the ages. You can offer the spare to a woman in tears. You can use the linen to avoid touching bathroom knobs. It makes a wonderful mask in the case of desperate last-minute need for larceny. I love handkerchiefs. I packed 10 in the garbage bag, knowing that large puncture wounds should be full of gauze. For this reason, I had to return the silk hankies. It is better for the absorbent cotton in case of a fall. What else? It was a tiny room with windows facing the main road in town. The firemen and police went up and down the road trying to find an entrance to Starbucks. They put in a one-way driveway to be tricky. I had some bills on my desk, but I didn't want to bring these to the afterlife. I decided to quickly pay for my parking bill because I didn't want my extra truck to get towed if I should be in the community hospital for very long. I said a small, "Thank you, God," because 2 of our 3 nurses had wanted to date, but you should never date medical people in a small town. Amputations happen when you are not a gentleman. What else? Sheets? Number comforter for comfort? Number Michelle had felt bad that I was cold without her cuddles and bought a comforter matching certain parts of her body. Peach. It was definitely a distraction if ever a gentleman has lady company. A man should have his bed colored in very serious colors, perhaps gray and black, and I needed a multi-tool. A multi-tool is the American version of a Swiss Army knife. It is neither a knife nor from the Swiss. Our multi-tools should be from Leatherman because they have pliers and blades, which do not fold back on fingers. They have finger locks. Unfortunately, I had the Lowe's knockoff multi-tool, which had already severed half of a finger. A nurse, who I did not date, stitched it back on with some weird thread that was supposed to dissolve. She kept sticking that fishhook needle and whispering, "Does it hurt? Does that hurt? What if I do this?" I didn't go back to remove the stitches, which didn't shrink or get dissolved. The nerve was actually clipped by the fake multi-tool, and I can feel the rain coming 5 days before the weatherman now. I put the multi-tool in the garbage bag with the whiskey and the handkerchiefs. 22 minutes. Now, in the smallest case that Michelle actually wanted to talk about paying for our kids' college and not throw me over the cliff, I was prepared to bring a checkbook. I would argue that the check should be endorsed to the child, herself. Michelle would argue that kids might spend all the money drinking and whoring like their father. I resented that comment because our town didn't actually have any real prostitutes. In order to avoid the impasse of how the child will spend the money for education, Michelle would push me over the cliff, wait 6 weeks, and get my life insurance. She didn't like long and sustained arguments because she was taking yoga. I decided to bring my checkbook and not transfer any money into the account. What would they say? "We're sorry. He has the money in a money market." but we cannot legally transfer this money to you. Is he around? Then she would feel really silly about kicking the goose over the glade. It is important for husbands and fathers to always be useful. Do not teach them how to start a BBQ grill. They will inevitably become vegans and hire a gardener. They will keep the seat down and the toothpaste caps fully engaged. The planned obsolescence of a man starts with money. Try to get your spouse fired. In my case, this was not possible. She worked for the state. So after so many decades, the man is not necessary. He must be thrown from the hill under the guise of good health. His dog may or may not follow, depending if the man fed the dog in the last few months. Dogs are ultimately loyal to the person who puts kibble in the bowl. It is nothing personal. 16 minutes till death. The waning sun reminded me, you could throw her down the hill. Wow, I never considered murder for life, insurance, or love. I never considered her last words. Would she fall down the hill and say, I was just kid, ding? Wow, this was huge. It didn't seem very noble to throw a former wife down a hill. I don't know what was going on with Jack and Jill, but I bet it wasn't his idea to get any water. Notice that Jack broke his crown, head, long before Jill slipped on the murder weapon. Moral: do not go up hills for water. Water likes to be lower due to gravity. I knew that a former spouse did not really care about my good health, never dying due to exercise, but I also felt she would bring me some socks out of duty. She is prideful like that. She wants her man to die with clean socks, because a coroner will look for the meaning of death and should not be confused by bad odors, nor have to cut the socks off the body. They get stiff with grime. Also, 11 minutes. I really wanted to get some veneers before death. It seems really creepy to have a perfect white smile in death but hide the blemishes with a beard in life. The coffee struggle had taken its toll. I have never heard of anyone suing Starbucks for their loss of white. How would you even quantify the loss? You Honor, I was going to get a new hot wife, but I couldn't smile due to Starbucks stains. How much did that cost you, Mr. Go-Round? The lady from San Jose had stock options of Oracle. She's probably a billionaire. I lost this opportunity because of Starbucks stains. I would never smile. Can you show me your receipts? No, Honor. I paid in cash to avoid needless tipping. How do we know you didn't stain your teeth from Pete's coffee? Pete's roast gives me heartburn. Can you prove this heartburn? Ouch. It was going to be just like the cigarette debacle. If you smoke one Marlboro in your life, you cannot blame Camels for your cancer. Tobacco manufacturers know this and promote community smoking to destroy the single source theory. 7 minutes. In my last 7 minutes of life, before Michelle brought the dog in the Prius, before the socks were delivered, and she had a large aluminum canister of water filled with melatonin to knock me out at the summit. She knows I get sleepy near the summit. Contrary to popular notions, St. Bernards and their cousin dog, the Bernese mountain dog, do not actually have smelling salts in their saliva glands. They cannot lick you to consciousness. They usually have less than a tankard of whiskey around their neck, because the whiskey is meant to fortify the dog in bad weather. Some share, that is true. But mostly the large dog will watch you falling into snoring, as the Michelle commands that he uses his large head to push his former master over the hill. The dog will think it is just a game since his eyes are poor on telescopic visions. He cannot tell if the cliff is a few feet or a few leagues. He will actually get excited to be playing a lazy game where he doesn't have to fetch and get sweaty. My poor dumb dog will be an accomplice to murder. No, if not for my own sake, I must think of California law, how they will eventually kill Caspian because he was a man killer. The law does not care if it was his idea or the woman. He will be taken to the Black Ops section of the SPCA and ethically sent to heaven. They are very moral about these things, and overcrowding is at an all-time high. Please remember to spray and neuter your pet to avoid euthanasia. My body? I need something reflective for the Air Force. She will probably bring me to Fort Ord to hike. They are an inactive Army base. This is why we need the Air Force to gather my remains. 1 minute. What the hell can they see from outer space? I decided to wrap myself in Mylar. I would go out looking like a Chinese spy balloon. Someone would find this story and know. It wasn't the dog's fault after all. I will try to come back to edit this. She just arrived with a Prius. The dog looks hungry. The Last Supper. Surprise party. Murder. Mystery. This is a complete satire, not intended to mock religion. I meant to enter this in. Write about a gallery whose paintings come alive at night. Oops. On the evening of April 6th, 30 AD, chaos ensued during an impromptu farewell dinner party. A hidden underground chamber hosted a jubilant soiree beneath the renowned Louvre Museum. The celebratory evening took a sinister turn as it transformed into a horrifying murder scene. The guests, driven by an overwhelming desire to uncover the culprit among them, were determined to solve the mysterious crime. The night began when the Louvre Gallery's lights faded to black. Mr. Dali flipped the sign on the door, reading closed. Greeting him as he stepped outside was a stunning display of swirling hues. Cobalt blue, incandescent yellow, and verdant green intermingled in the starry sky, resembling confetti. The stars twinkled like a celestial choir, harmonizing with his melodic whistle. Their mystical light illuminated the sky. He followed the otherworldly glow as it led him back home. Unease settled over him as he walked. He suspected he might have left the doors unlocked or the lights on. Behind the museum's closed doors, 3 distorted clocks with persistent memories chimed 7 or 8 times, sounding garbled. The hands of the clock, resembling molten lava, melted across the front desk. The time dissolved and spread across the ornate chairs and marble floor. Across the way, bustling activity filled the refectory of Monastero di San Lorenzo. The atmosphere was a mix of intense excitement and underlying unease, capturing the poignant moment. Fragrant scents of yeast, toasted grains, melted butter, roasted meats, and aromatic herbs wafted through the air, tantalizing and mouth-watering. Shouting in the grand chamber, Andrew exclaimed, "Almost 8!" He fidgeted, holding a torch, and lit the remaining candles on the grand table. "This useless lighter won't work," he exclaimed, slamming it down on the table in frustration. Moonlight streamed through the windows, casting a radiant glow on the refectory. The flickering candles created a serene ambiance despite the commotion in the chamber. "To hell with it all," Peter mutters. He opens a bottle of Chianti and starts guzzling it from the lip of the wicker vessel, feeling annoyed. With red-stained lips, Peter exclaims, "This is an absolute catastrophe." John and Philip emerged from the kitchen, coughing and struggling to breathe, while a cloud of smoke engulfed them. The room fell silent. "We still have bread," John says, cowering behind Philip, hoping nothing was flying at his head through the air. A ruckus ensued. Bartholomew stomped his foot. "You need to pull yourself together. Guests will arrive at any moment. This night is supposed to be a celebration. Quit fighting like gladiators in the Monera." Thomas and Matthew rushed to the door as the bell chimed to greet their first guest. "Welcome, Mona. It brings me great joy to have you," Thomas said, escorting the introspective and ethereal figure through the door. With an enigmatic smile, hinting at hidden secrets, and unspoken feelings, Mona thanked her hosts for the kind invitation. After Mona, guests flooded through the door. Peter appreciated the guests' punctuality because the guest of honor was due to appear soon. The young ladies of Avignon huddled in a corner. Nadira Mbali embodied the fierce spirit of independence by wearing splendid tribal patterns inspired by Africa. Her clothing celebrated her heritage. Isabella Ramos's distinct and striking features drew Nadira into deep conversations. They explored the complexities of womanhood and society's limiting expectations. Isabella's words were sharp and precise, dissecting human emotions with a scalpel. She challenged societal norms and conventions. Sofia Calderon's avant-garde Cubist aesthetic captivated guests. Her fragmented and distorted forms shattered conventional ideas of representation. The quirky style invited viewers to critically examine their perceptions of reality, immersing them in an intriguing and thought-provoking experience. Ava Serrano radiated confidence and sensuality. Her unapologetic sexuality defied societal expectations of modesty and control. Ava fearlessly moved her body across the chambers like a dancer. She hobnobbed with guests while challenging preconceived notions of femininity and inviting them to confront their inhibitions. Carmen Reyes emerged while concealing her face with a mask. Her fearless advocacy for women's rights and empowerment was her prime topic of discussion. Against patriarchy, she wielded her words as weapons, her voice as sharp as her wit. In each debate, she advocated for gender equality. Carmen's unwavering commitment to justice and the refusal of silence symbolized strength and resilience. With a mesmerizing display of ethereal beauty, Venus, the goddess of love, revealed her presence. Her allure transcended the limitations of the mortal realm. The enchanting depths of her ocean blue eyes mirrored the boundless compassion and understanding that resided within her soul. As she mingled, she commanded attention with her statuesque figure, which exuded sensuality and strength. A charismatic and enigmatic lad, Adam flirted with Venus by boasting about his creation. The confidence in the mastery of his anatomy and intricate details evoked awe and inspiration in Venus. Adam's charm was undeniable, with piercing blue eyes that held untold stories. He witnessed her captivating charm and inner radiance, which mesmerized him. She offered solace and ignited the flames of passion within his heart. Venus was captivated by his brilliant mind, filled with insatiable curiosity and a humble demeanor. Isabella Fontaine was a ravishing and imaginative woman. Her demeanor enchanted Alessandro Fiore. They bonded over their shared passion for art. As they embraced, their love and desire for each other became apparent with every gentle stroke of her hair. Their passion reflected the love that burns within their hearts, and their souls became forever entwined in the kiss, heard worldwide. The guests surrounded a group of dogs dressed in human clothing, playing poker around a table. The dogs were all engaged in the game when a raven flew to the skylight, warning the guests that their guest of honor was nearing. Peter gathered the guests in the middle of the chamber, and as the doors opened, everyone yelled, "Surprise! Jesus!" Jesus paused, blushing with shock. He relished the moment, his kind eyes reflecting his deep compassion for everyone present. His serene and benevolent face radiated a sense of divine wisdom and love. Long, flowing hair and a well-groomed beard complemented his appearance. He moved across the marble floors elegantly, showcasing his spiritual authority and transcendence, while wearing a modest billowing garment extending to the ground. After removing the plum cloak draped over his shoulders, he adjusted the sash around his waist. Everyone present was crowded around Jesus, eager to touch the hem of his garment or bask in his presence. When he spoke, he filled the room with awe and reverence. His words carried a weight of profound wisdom and grace. His eyes sparkled with kindness, drawing everyone in. The atmosphere shifted as a sense of peace and hope enveloped the room. Peter gathered the guests around the table, rallying them to make a toast. He held up his goblet and said, "To the man who brings light and love wherever he goes, may he bless all with his presence on the road that he ventures forth on. The Louvre will miss you, Jesus." To everyone's dismay, John and Philip stood and announced that their dinner had gone awry. They'd only be serving bread and butter. James the younger ran around filling everyone's glasses with wine to ease the tension caused by the unexpected change in dinner plans. Eliza Hawthorne stood out among the guests with serene strength and unwavering determination. Her piercing eyes, reminiscent of the golden hues of an autumn sky, mirrored her inner fortitude. Her hair, arranged in a bun, complemented her firm lips. They exuded an air of stoicism and resolve that belied her delicate features. In his convictions, Henry stayed steadfast with a few words. He gazed at the crowd with eyes resembling the roots of an ancient oak tree that shaded their farmhouse. He silently stood beside Eliza as she extended her invitation with effortless grace. She declares, "We propose to share the bounty of our garden, inviting everyone to partake in the fresh vegetables outside in our cart." With his broad shoulders and hands roughened by years of manual labor, Henry showcases his physical prowess. They embodied rugged masculinity and muted strength as he reached for a piece of bread. Eliza's hands, calloused from years of hard work on the family farm, coaxing life from the fertile soil, handed him the warm butter. Laughter and chatter filled the room. Everyone enjoyed the simple meal and each other's company. Wine flowed with the harmonious chatter, celebrating Jesus. Amelia Munch interrupted the chatter by wailing a piercing scream, which reverberated through the refectory like shattering glass. Fear and existential angst etched anxiety across her porcelain skin. Her haunting beauty and piercing green eyes conveyed a profound sense of terror. Everyone gathered around curiously to see a nude woman lying on a couch covered in blood. Judas Iscariot declares that someone among them is the menaced assassin. The group exchanges nervous glances, unsure of whom to trust. Suspicions grow, causing the once warm and inviting atmosphere to turn cold and tense. Iscariot's accusation lingers, casting a shadow over the joyous gathering. With unwavering resolve and dignity, Margaret Whittaker started whistling an eerie tune as she rocked in her chair. Despite facing hardships, she exuded tranquility and grace. Her silver hair was pulled back tight in a bun, and her hands were folded in her lap. Though tired and worn from years of worry, Margaret's eyes sparkled with muted intelligence, as if she knew something. Her calm demeanor drew others to her, commanding their attention. As the evening wore on, whispers of suspicion and curiosity circulated among the guests. Margaret's enigmatic presence had drawn them all in, and unease settled over the room as they awaited her next move. Amelia Monk wailed a piercing scream out of nowhere again. The scream reverberated through the refectory like shattering glass. Fear etched her porcelain skin with anxiety and existential angst. Her haunting beauty and piercing green eyes again convey a profound sense of terror. With a sense of exacerbation, Mona Lisa wonders, what is it now? Her face changes, adorned with a tapestry of emotions that flows with each fleeting moment, captivating all who dared to bask in her presence. Mona Lisa possesses the uncanny ability to cloak her thoughts and feelings in an aura of mystery. Intrigued, all the guests surround her. "The girl with the pearl earring only wears one," stuttered Emila Munch. "Behold, it is right there," she said, pointing to the lifeless woman. Underneath her body, a pearl sparkled, unraveling a clue. Munch's discovery challenged the guests to confront their wildest fears. Emilia epitomized the situation with anxiety and the human condition. She reminded everyone of their shared vulnerabilities in the situation. The need for camaraderie and understanding in this tragic moment was undeniable, urging immediate action. The girl with the pearl earring reached up to cover her bare ear. Her delft was sublime and mysterious. The girl's modest, dark-colored gown and her long chestnut hair exuded strength and resilience, but her piercing blue eyes divulged her guilt, unveiling her hidden desire and rebellion against societal expectations. "Show us your matching earrings," said the bulldog, wearing a top hat and a monocle. A terrier in a tuxedo, a dachshund in a sweater vest, and a golden retriever in a baseball cap chimed in. "Where is your missing trinket, yeah?" They quipped and resumed the game of poker to bet on whodunit. Admitting her guilt, Emilia, the intelligent and keen girl with the opal accessory, takes responsibility. She knew escaping this blunder would be impossible. Her eyes reflect the depth of her inner turmoil and dreams. "Envy clouded my vision, distorting my perception of reality," she cried. At a nearby diner, a police officer was consoling a young boy who had run away from home. Out of nowhere, his walkie-talkie crackled to life, notifying him of a homicide in progress. The officer rushed to the scene, apprehending the girl with the missing pearl earring believed to be involved in the murder. The situation's urgency demanded swift action, and the officer quickly secured the suspect. Jesus blessed her as she repented of her sins and was hauled off to Artemisia Gentileschi prison for high-risk female offenders in Surrey. His compassion grew as he saw the remorse in her eyes, knowing she was just a victim of circumstances. As she left in handcuffs, he committed to visiting her and helping her turn her life around. Emilia looked back at the kind-hearted man, with tears streaming down her face, grateful for his compassion during her darkest moment. She vowed to make amends for her past mistakes and to strive for a better future. With a determined spirit, Jesus watched the girl with the pearl earring disappear out the door, vowing to guide her toward redemption. The scene touched the police officer's heart, sparking a glimmer of hope in his chest. Perhaps the girl's story will have a different ending with the Savior by her side. A sense of unease lingered in Mr. Dolly's mind as he rattled his keys in the museum's front door. He meticulously inspected the premises, ensuring every door was locked and the lights were extinguished. When the last switch flipped, a surprise gasp reverberated through the room. The startled guests scampered, their footsteps echoing in the deserted halls.